times like these, we feel gratitude for our doctors, nurses, and first responders, our tradespeople, workers, and innovators, entrepreneurs, and small businesses, for coming together during an extraordinary crisis, showing that tough times bring out our best. We've faced them before, and we will come back, better and stronger, rebuilding one day at a time, rebuilding Connecticut together. A message from CBIA.
It's unreal to work for a company that embraces inclusion the way Medtronic does. I feel comfortable bringing my whole self to work, and I also feel encouraged to do so at Medtronic.
Our history of inclusion and diversity begins with our mission. At Medtronic, we strongly believe that every voice matters. Diverse perspectives and experiences produce better decisions, and that leads to better business performance and, more importantly, better outcomes for patients.
I joined the Medtronic Women's Network, which we call MWN, in 2016. Since joining MWN, I felt that Medtronic is a lot smaller, and I've been able to build connections globally.
The Medtronic Women's Network was repurposed and recreated in 2013. Medtronic wants women to be bold, to be courageous, and ultimately know that they can get their career desires and dreams met at Medtronic.
We set a goal to see 40% or more women in global leadership by 2020. The 40% became part of Medtronic's overall 40-30-20 goal. And we put in place strategies and programs rooted in measurement and accountability to achieve these goals.
The Medtronic Women's Network has a leadership team made up of 16 VPs from around the globe, representing functions, regions, and it's our opportunity to meet quarterly with the CEO and the CHRO, as well as the other network leaders, to explain our progress to our strategy.
Another highlight is that we've rapidly scaled NWN, as well as women in leadership across the globe. Now, as we sit here today, there are more than 15,000 NWN members in 68 countries. This represents a 585% increase in less than 4 years.
We also have a focus on women in R&D and STEM roles through the Women in Science and Engineering program. WISE seeks to build an inclusive work environment for women in science and engineering through outreach, recruiting, and talent development.
I feel so encouraged by my mentors because they're a great example of what a female in a leadership role looks like, and that one day I can be that too.
In the US and several other countries, we've achieved 100% pay equity for gender by job title. We're creating a culture that empowers employees to lead and drive change. As a result, we have leaders and employees working together to influence and co-create policies that contribute to job satisfaction over the course of their careers here. A good example is our market-leading family care leave benefit.
While we are proud of our progress, we recognize there is still much to be done. Our journey won't stop until we reach gender parity and proportional ethnic representation for all employees at all levels and around the world. Our commitment to inclusion and diversity is unwavering and will remain a business priority in support of our mission for years to come.
I want to be known by my peers by a leader and advocate for other women, and also as someone who's not afraid to get things done. I am committed to being intentional about inclusion.
Good morning. My name is Beatriz Gutierrez, President and CEO of ComStat. Welcome to the 2021 When Women Lead Conference hosted by CBIA. This event would not be possible without the generous support of Medtronic, including Cigna, Raytheon, and Stanley Black & Decker. What a year it has been for all of us, and what a test to the creativity, resilience, and leadership of women everywhere as we balance work, family, community duties through the many unprecedented challenges that last year brought. As a business professional, mother, daughter, and a person from a diverse background, this past year has challenged my professional skills, my personal skills, and my assumptions of what it is to be an American like never before. Today, we will hear from Connecticut business leaders about how they help their organizations adapt to a new way of working and continue to successfully meet customer demands. We will also learn new skills on how to bring mindfulness into our daily lives to help balance the many obligations and stresses of our lives. And then we'll close the morning reflecting on the relevance of diversity and inclusion in supporting and building stronger workplaces and communities. First is Medtronic's Megan Rosengarten, president of the company's Surgical Robotics Operating Unit, who will share her story as a leader in the booming field of medical technology. She is an innovative thinker, providing new insights for growing and sustaining Medtronic in areas across the medical device and consumer product industries. We also want to hear from you today. Please use the chat box at any time to post your questions for our speakers and panelists. Megan, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you, Beatrice. I am really thrilled and honored to be here, both for myself as well as to represent Medtronic, as we're very proud to be this year's title sponsor for When Women Lead in this conference, and such a critical conversation and conference to have, as you mentioned, given the year that we are all coming through. And as many of you probably know, Medtronic is a longtime member of the Connecticut Business and Industry Association, and feel very fortunate and value the important efforts and the events like the one today that the CBIA puts on. And I do have to do a special thank you and shout out to Amy and to the conference planning team who put this together. I think that this is a really amazing agenda and slate of speakers that we're going to hear from today. So thank you to the team there. And as Beatrice said, I think that we're going to all find ourselves in 2021 saying that this past year has been challenging, and it will probably continue to be the most gross understatement of many of our lives to say that it has been challenging and with change, and definitely due to the pandemic, which has become almost a sort of shared experience globally, going through that together, but as well as the conflict and productive conflict, I would say, and maybe unproductive divisiveness that has happened within the United States and more broadly around the world. So a lot, and a lot as women leaders in our home lives, within our families, the people that we lead there, as well as in the workplace. So a lot. And for the little bit that I wanted to share in my time this morning, I wanted to talk a little about what I call durable lessons. So those changes, those improvements that were born out of necessity that we all experienced, and I'm sure you each personally experienced again in your personal life and your professional life and as leaders, what of those things were good and that we want to hold on to and become durable as we come out of the pandemic in the past year. So just a little bit that I wanted to focus on today. I think that from really, really big things like sometimes changing our own kind of values and priorities of what's important to us and what that balance looks like in life, all the way to small details of how do you maybe get your kids out the door to school every day or not out the door to school every day, to how do we support emotionally and physically elders in our families. There's just been a lot, and I think none of us has been unaffected or unchanged from the past year and the pandemic. So, thinking about like how we each navigate and find our own way, I thought about that within Medtronic and some of the things of where we've maybe focused or shown up differently due to specifically the pandemic. And there are kind of three things that I wanted to share there. And one is a recognition, first of all, that as one of the largest medical device and medical technology companies in the world, we have the means, the resources, and the responsibility to make a big impact in the world. And I think this is something that at Medtronic, we heard in the video previously, has always been a focus. It really, really came to the forefront in the past year around we have to do something. We have to have a positive impact. And one of those ways that showed up was in how we collaborate. We're a pretty collaborative culture and company, I would like to say, in general. However, in order to get the things done we needed to do, namely to produce and distribute medical technology to the parts of the world of the highest need and the patients at the highest risk, we couldn't do that alone, nor could we do that with our what I'll call traditional partners and collaborators. So we had to turn to the automotive industry. We had to collaborate with state and country level government officials to understand and broker and work together of how we were going to urgently get technology again to those in the highest need. And it really caused us to stop and think differently about what can be accomplished when you rally a broad group of people that are disparate around a common goal and challenge the creativity of how you accomplish that and break through some bureaucracy at the same time. So I think that was one big lesson learned that will become durable that we take forward. And the other was an almost unseen thing where we decided to share our intellectual property. So some of the assets that are of the highest value to us as an organization is our IP or intellectual property and patents and things like that. And we decided to share those with entrepreneurs and with manufacturers when it was in pursuit of producing more critical equipment and more equipment at lower cost, so we could expand the access to that technology and that medical care to more people around the world. So that was a really great learning and experience there. And then the last one was around innovation. And innovation is our company's lifeblood and always had been. So that part wasn't new. The lens that was interesting, and we got sort of these durable lessons learned out of, was putting the lens of remote. And we would sometimes joke, we would be talking on Zoom, not walking around the halls, but on Zoom all the time, of remote everything. That became a phrase, remote everything. How are we going to make all of our stuff remote? And we did focus that down more than the going everything, but just the general sort of urgency and fervor around how do we help patients stay home and get the care that they need when that's appropriate for them. And that took innovating new technologies around things like patient monitoring, and patient monitoring moving from a care setting, hospital care setting, to a home setting, and doing that adequately and doing that well as from a healthcare professional, really focused on how do we train and support surgeons and doctors remotely, so that we're limiting the risk as much as possible of having more patients overwhelming our surgeons and doctors in the OR, more patients and doctors running the risk of exposure to COVID-19. So that sort of keen focus on remote and then narrowing it down to where it was the most important and doing rapid iteration was really impressive and something that we want to hold on to. And we proved to ourselves we could do things that prior we probably would have said was not possible at the speed that we were able to accomplish it. So I think those are, sort of some of the Medtronic-wide lessons learned that hopefully resonate and are helpful with you all as well. And where I know, no single company can solve for the challenges that we're seeing across the world. It really is important, I believe, that large organizations with resources are doing a considerable part. And at Medtronic, we believe we have a responsibility to do that. And then maybe bringing it a little bit closer to home to the business that I lead within Medtronic. We're called Surgical Robotics, as Beatrice mentioned, have a large campus here in Connecticut. I'm calling to you from Connecticut, my home right now. We're located in North Haven, Connecticut, for our spot here. And our business is focused on, like the name sounds, developing and bringing to market robots. So robots that are used in surgery, as well as analytics solutions that look like artificial intelligence that help surgeons and healthcare providers make better decisions and more informed decisions for their patients. And the reason we do this is we believe that patients around the world deserve access to quality surgical care. And we think that providing robotics combined with artificial intelligence, we can reduce unwanted variability, and by doing so, improve clinical outcomes and reduce cost. So that's a little of who we are and why we show up every day. And the pieces of the pandemic that were, I would put those durable lessons learned for us. There were many, but a couple was that we're an organization that's in this very fast-paced, dynamic, exciting technology space of AI and robotics, paired with a really important patient impact and mission that we're working towards. And to do that, we do depend a lot on what I would call serendipitous interactions, cross-functional groups physically being in the same place and ideating on how to solve problems. And we pride ourselves on a focus of solving complex challenges as they arise on 24-hour and 48-hour types of cycles of working through things. So to be almost thrown overnight into an entirely virtual environment was a challenge. And one of the many kind of lessons learned there was, for me as a leader, to never doubt the creativity and the diversity of thought within my team and to create forums to tap into that. And one example was, again, within about 24 hours of us realizing that we were going to need, for safety reasons, to close down our labs and facilities, we had software engineers that took it upon themselves to write code and install code that allowed us to remote into our robots that were in the lab from home. And so we were able to continue software development and testing of the system from a remote environment, from home. And we would not have been able to do that if it wasn't for giving the room, the voice, and the ability to take risks within our teams to ideate those types of solutions. So that was another big one and very durable lesson for us in how we're going to be working and doing business going forward. So again, I will kind of leave that with you, and please in the chat and throughout the day, I would love to hear what those durable lessons are for you. And I'm convinced that we as a state, a country, a society are going to come out stronger for this experience of COVID, and we won't waste a crisis, as they say, going through that. So we've got a lot to learn from each other, and with that, I'm really looking forward to hearing from our speakers, and I have the honor of introducing our opening speaker here, Wendy Sherry. Wendy, welcome. And Wendy is the president of Cigna Connecticut and Payer Solutions. She is a leader within Cigna and across our Connecticut community more broadly, and really exciting to hear from her about her experiences during the past year, the challenges for herself as well as for Cigna, and how you've overcome those in really inspiring ways. So with that, I will hand it over, Wendy, to you.
Great. Good morning, Megan. It's great to see you this morning. And I love the phrase durable lessons. I might have to steal that going forward. So it is such an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you today. And normally we would absolutely be gathered together in person, and I'd be telling you how great it was to see all of you in the audience. But of course, as Megan just referenced, right, COVID-19 has upended many scenarios, and this one is no exception. Thankfully, it does seem that we are on this cusp of returning to what I'll call some type of new normal. So hopefully this will be one of our last virtual gatherings, and next time we will have the opportunity to be together and meet in person. I'm really thrilled to have an opportunity to talk to you today because women in leadership is a topic that I am really passionate about, and I never, ever get tired about talking about it. The title of this event, When Women Lead, actually speaks to the importance of continuing to focus on this topic. After all, we don't have gatherings to discuss when men lead. No, those events are really just titled leadership with no qualifier. It's 2021, and if you can believe it, it's been more than 50 years since the women's liberation movement became active. And after all of the social change and the progress that we've experienced, you'd think by now the idea of women in leadership wouldn't be a thing. It wouldn't need to be a topic, but it is. And that's because of statistics like this. Only 4.9% of Fortune 500 CEOs and just 2% of S&P 500 CEOs are women. That's according to a research study by Catalyst. And this is despite all the studies that show that women are just as capable, just as, if not more effective than men in leadership roles. Numerous studies pointing to higher productivity, stronger financial results with women in leadership roles. Despite all of this, women have not yet achieved equal representation in the top ranks of leadership. So clearly, there is more work to do. I do consider myself very fortunate to have achieved a senior leadership role at Cigna, where I have spent the bulk of my professional career. I will tell you that this did not occur by accident. It took focused actions on my part and the part of my employer and the support of key leaders. In particular, let me share a story, and I remember this moment clear as day. When I was having a, quote, career conversation with a senior leader who is actually now my boss, I shared with him that I would love to be a market president one day. And as a market president, you lead sales and distribution, and I've never been in sales. And I told him that. What I was actually saying to him is that I wasn't qualified for that role and therefore really shouldn't aspire to it. He very quickly reacted and said, "That's crap. Sales is all about influence, and you are the best influencer that I know." It was in that moment that he gave me the confidence to press forward and to go after that goal of becoming a market president. And here I am. That story has actually been a really strong inspiration for me personally to pay it forward. I now mentor and I coach many, many high potentials, both men as well as women. And I'd like to think that along the way, I've actually accumulated a certain amount of wisdom. Maybe it's those durable lessons that Megan referred to, certainly a point of view, about actions that will help you achieve your full potential and position yourself for leadership roles. So let me share what I often refer to as my 3 Bs. If you can put the first slide up, please. Be intentional, be visible, and be courageous. So let me talk a little bit about what each of these means. Be intentional. Being intentional is about identifying and setting a goal, and I mean a specific goal, and then writing a development plan to achieve it. And it's not just a generic goal. So let me ask you a question. How many of your goal statements sound something like this? I want to increase my scope of responsibility, I want to leverage my skills, and I want to add value. Well, that statement describes almost any job and is not what I mean when I say be intentional. So let me give you what my goal statement sounded like before I assumed my current role as both the president of Payer Solutions and the president of the Connecticut market. My goal statement said, in 18 months, I want to be a multi-segment leader. It was specific and it included a time frame. In addition to setting this goal, I also identified 3 key actions necessary to achieve that goal, related to skill development, related to networking, and also related to succession planning. Here's where the next part of being intentional, and I will tell you this one can be scary, you have to tell people. And I mean tell the right people. So it's not telling your mother, it's not telling your closest friends, it's telling people who can actually help you achieve those goals. So that's people like your manager, a sponsor, an HR leader, a leader in an area where you desire to work in one day. And I will tell you that every time I update my development plan, which I do on a fairly regular basis, call it every 12 to 18 months, the scariest part of that is actually when I hit send to that small group of people that I am now enlisting to help me achieve that goal. Because that's when all what I refer to as the head trash begins. What if I'm not capable of the role? What if the organization doesn't view me in that way? What if, what if, what if? But here's what gives me the absolute confidence to hit send each and every time. First, once I tell that person, I've actually made them accountable for helping me. I have formally asked them for help. Here's the second reason. If I change my mind or determine that the goal is really no longer right for me, it can be changed. This is why I use Microsoft Word to write down my goals, because our goals are not cast in stone. This is what I mean when I say be intentional. The second B is be visible. And as women, we know that we love to check off our to-do list. And what if, though, the great work that you're doing or your team is doing is not visible? Let me tell you, it doesn't matter. And here's why. Listen to what I'm about to say. The most important conversations about your career happen when you're not in the room. Listen to that. The most important conversations about your career happen when you're not in the room. So you need to find ways to promote the good work of you and your team. Because after all, a true leader understands the power of lifting up his or her team. So when you are not in that room, you need to make sure that it is filled with great stories about your work and your leadership. And I know that this too can be challenging for many women, because again, here's where that head trash starts to occur. Will I sound arrogant? Will I sound boastful? Shouldn't just doing great work be enough? Unfortunately, it's not. So let me give you a few suggestions to start with, just to help get you over that hurdle of being comfortable being visible. First, maybe try sharing a positive email that you received from a client. How about highlighting a significant milestone achieved by the team? Or how about sharing an idea for a future product or maybe a process innovation, an idea that came to you maybe when you were taking that morning shower? That is what being visible is all about. The next B is be courageous. So if you listened to my podcast prior to the event, you may have heard me use this phrase, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And this is part of being courageous. As women, we tend to only apply for jobs when we can satisfy every single prerequisite in that job description. The opposite is actually true of men, who will apply for a job with the confidence that whatever they don't know, they can learn once they're in the role. So being courageous is having the confidence to apply for that job where you can't satisfy all of the requirements. You need to push yourself outside of that comfort zone. I often say that the only job that my resume actually qualified me for was the first job when I entered Cigna over 20 plus years ago. So being courageous is also having the confidence to ask for what you need. Whether it's a new experience, a new skill, a mentor. I actually had one of my female leaders ask if she could take an executive class at Wharton because she recognized that her financial skills were not up to snuff. That's an example of being courageous. I had the courage to ask for a role that provided me with the much needed market experience to achieve my goal of market president. And talk about courage, I even asked our CEO. And soon after that conversation, the company did provide me with that opportunity by placing me in the COO role for New England. This was actually the role I had before becoming the market president of Connecticut. So as I noted, part of being courageous is being confident. I recently read a study that shows that women are far less confident in their ability than men when they are younger. And this actually could be a factor in what is holding women back. The research also showed that the confidence levels actually change over time, and they move in these opposite directions. So as women get older, they actually become more confident. And as men get older, they actually become less confident over time. This actually suggests that we need to help younger women feel more confident, so that they have the knowledge, the talents, the skills, the confidence to achieve and to advance. This is a huge area of opportunity for mentoring and leadership development. It's an area that I personally focus on when I am mentoring young female talent. So my advice to women, especially younger women, is be courageous, be willing to stretch, and be confident. Apply for that job that you did not think you were ready for, simply because you couldn't check all the boxes. Chances are your male competition for that job, trust me, they can't check all the boxes either. And the worst thing, and I mean the absolute worst thing, is that you don't get the job. But you'll have the confidence boost just knowing that you tried. Trust me, I have not gotten every job that I have gone for. And I am a firm believer that things happen for a reason. A colleague of mine actually recently used a phrase after going for a job and not getting it. And I love this phrase. What she said is, this job did not deserve me. Think about that. That job did not deserve me. It is such a powerful statement. So continuing on this theme of confidence, if you can advance to the next slide, one thing I've learned in the past year is that having confidence in your ability to lead becomes even more important than ever during a crisis or a time of great uncertainty and disruption. And I think it is absolutely fair to say that the past year qualifies as a time of great uncertainty and disruption. As it became apparent last March that we were going to be working from home for more than just a couple of weeks, I had to ask myself, what adjustments do I need to make in how I lead? How can I best guide my team? How can I best help and support them? How do we continue to support our businesses and our key stakeholders? What I realized then, and what I believe still holds true today, is that we can lead through just about any situation if we hold on to a few key principles. The first principle is what I refer to as focus. I have always challenged my team to focus on what matters most. And during a crisis or a time of uncertainty, that means focusing on what matters most now. Because during a time of upheaval or uncertainty, what mattered most yesterday isn't necessarily what matters most today. And being able to prioritize and focus on what matters now will help you save the energy and use it productively when you most need it. As I say, try to think of your day as a marathon and not a sprint. What was important yesterday may no longer be urgent, and what was urgent may no longer be critical. So take stock and ensure that you're truly focusing on what matters most today. And guess what? Reassess that tomorrow. The second principle is team. And when you're a leader, you are not working in isolation. What you do, the actions you take, affect others and involve others. So never forget about the power of your team. I have always believed that people are everything. As I say, having the right strategy, that's important. But having the right people, now that is critical. And do not try to do it all yourself. Lean on your team and empower your leaders. Set the guardrails, but then let them lead. The third principle is tools. And when the COVID-19 crisis erupted, we discovered that our toolbox was in many ways inadequate or maybe needed a little bit of adjusting. As an example, that meant for us a really fast pivot to using virtual capabilities in a more intense way to stay connected and to stay productive. As a leader, it meant that I had to ensure that there were no barriers to communication or productivity because we still had a business to run and we had tens of thousands of people relying on us each and every day. So while the COVID-19 affected everyone, from C-suite to middle management to the rank and file, we are now seeing that this pandemic has had a profound effect on women. So you can advance to the next slide. Even in the best of times, it is a challenge for women to balance their responsibilities at work and at home. COVID-19 made this balancing act even more challenging. So I will say it, fair or unfair, women take on more of the childcare responsibilities. I know it was true in my household. According to a recent McKinsey study on women in the workplace, mothers are more than two times as likely as fathers to worry about their performance being judged negatively because of their caregiving responsibilities. And this was actually true pre-pandemic. Let me share a recent story that really solidified this for me. A male colleague of mine shared that he and his wife were expecting their first child. And after congratulating him, I asked him if he was going to be taking paternity leave because that's something that Cigna offers. He said he was considering it. A few months later, he told me that he had actually decided to take the paternity leave after he was, quote, able to get comfortable with the perception. Comfortable with the perception. That statement really impacted me because as a female leader, I viewed it as a time that he would get to bond with his newborn, help his wife during a really tough time. For those that have had children, we all remember when the daily goal was taking a shower. So that was my perception of his decision to take paternity leave. The reality is the perception that he worried about was what other men would think, not women. It is this kind of perception from men that women have long had to contend with when it's time to start a family. You start to wonder, if I take time off to care for my newborn, will somebody think I'm less committed to my career? If I leave to attend that school event, will someone think I'm less able to get that promotion? We know that perception all too well. So this was a clear moment that really supported that McKinsey study. My hope is that more and more companies will allow for paternity leave and that more and more men will take advantage of it. So that when taking time off to care for a newborn, that'll be something that all parents do, not just women. And that is actually how we end the perception. So getting back to the impacts of COVID, the responsibilities definitely grew as it related to women and the childcare responsibilities. With children learning remotely, with daycares closed, the workload of working moms and the stress to not allow it to impact their work also grew. The study noted that more mothers are considering a switch to lower profile jobs or considering leaving the workforce entirely. Mothers are also far more likely than fathers to now thinking about reducing their work hours, taking a leave of absence, or switching from a full-time job to part-time work. Let me read you a quote from a female vice president who was cited in the McKinsey study. And I'm going to read this quote verbatim. She said, "I don't have a sliver of time without a meeting from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single day. There's no buffer to get a glass of water, to go to the bathroom, or check on my child. I've had a couple of days in the past 2 weeks where I barely saw my son for 15 minutes. Since COVID-19, I've really thought about whether I can have a long-term career at this company." Wow. I bet that statement probably resonates with some of you out there. And to think that an event like COVID-19 could profoundly change the career trajectory and the leadership potential for millions of women, it's remarkable. Senior level women are now 1.5 times more likely than senior men to think about downshifting their careers or leaving the workforce simply because of COVID-19. Almost 3 out of 4 cite burnout as a main reason. Senior level women are burning out at a higher rate than their male counterparts. Let me read you a few more statistics. 36% of senior women, compared to just 27% of senior men, say they feel pressure to work more. 54% of senior women, compared to just 41% of senior men, say they feel exhausted. 39% of senior women, compared to 29% of senior men, say they feel burned out. These statistics are definitely sobering, and they underscore the old truth in the line about how Ginger Rogers did the same thing as Fred Astaire, but she did it backwards and on heels. This, you could say, is a Ginger Rogers moment. Women at all levels, particularly in leadership roles, feel pressured to do more, and it's taking a huge toll on them. And it's not just the McKinsey study that's reporting this. A CNBC SurveyMonkey survey had similar findings. It showed 65% of working women believe the pandemic has made it worse for women at work. More than half of the women surveyed said they feel burned out, or at least some of the time. And more than 1/3 said they've thought about quitting their job over the past year. Here's one that really stuck with me. 42% of the women surveyed said they feel very ambitious, compared to 54%. Again, 42% down from 54% who feel very ambitious in a similar survey just 1 year ago. So when people say things are getting worse now than before, what they're saying is they're burned out. When fewer people are reporting that they're being very ambitious, when 1/3 say they're thinking about quitting, well, none of that, and I mean none of that, is healthy for a business. It's not healthy in the short term, and it is definitely not healthy in the long term either. And this notion of burnout, which was cited multiple times, is also not healthy for us as individuals. As women, this is another area where we need to be intentional about recognizing it and taking actions to address. Even in the best of times, we need to pay attention to our health. And I mean our whole health. That includes mental and emotional health. It is absolutely essential that we take time to recharge. And unfortunately, recharging often falls to the bottom of those to-do lists, and sometimes it even falls off the list entirely. I remember a story when I stood up a women in leadership event for our brokers here locally in Connecticut. And we decided to host the event at the Norwich Inn and Spa. It was a 2-day event with the express purpose of recharging, making connections, and finding inspiration. And yes, recharging most certainly included a spa service, like a massage and a facial. I recall several women leaders being a little bit uncomfortable saying yes to the event. They were saying things like, how could I possibly justify having a massage as part of a work event? I recall several women noting that they needed to withhold that information from a spouse or a coworker. So let me ask you this question. Would a man have had the same reaction if they were asked to join a colleague or a client for a round of golf during the workday? Our event had all of the elements that were critical to growing your business: recharging, making connections, and finding inspiration. Once we reminded our guests of the importance of these aspects in achieving their business objectives, they quickly realized that this was a no-guilt event, and in fact, it was a very important work event. So taking the time to recharge has become more important than ever with everything that we've been through over the past year. And we simply have to make it a priority. This is absolutely a very constant work in process for me. Very much like my career goals, I take the time to reassess and recalibrate. And COVID would definitely fall in the category of a recalibration moment. Like many things, I needed to find new ways to work and to live my life. So recharging myself was certainly no exception. For me, it became about finding Peloton. I have to say that I've become quite devoted to it. Some might actually call it an addiction. For those that are Peloton riders, you know what I mean. But for me, it was the perfect way to recharge. And I've also found this great brand new community of other people who share this passion. Once a week, I even allow myself the opportunity to start my workday at 10 a.m. so I can get in a morning ride. Those are actually some of my most productive workdays because I start the day both energized and recharged. So give yourself permission. Find your Peloton, whatever works for you. And if you're a leader, what a wonderful way to role model the notion of whole person health and giving others that permission to do the same. Last year was notable, not just because of COVID-19, but also because of that, what I'll refer to as the gut punch we all felt when George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. The past year was a time when we finally began to have the long overdue conversations about systemic racism here in America. Uncomfortable conversations for sure, but important ones. The McKinsey study that I've been citing also found that senior women were stronger allies to women of color than were senior men. Senior women were much more likely to say that they actively will listen to the personal stories of women of color about bias or mistreatment, that they will publicly acknowledge or give credit to the women of color for their ideas and their work, more likely to take a public stand to support gender equality, to mentor or to sponsor a woman of color. And I'm really proud to say that I fall in that category. All of this makes you wonder what the workplace will look like in the future if women leaders start to lead in large numbers. What will it mean for the women who are left behind? What will the long-term organizational impacts be? And this is a really important question, what can we do now to keep women leaders we have while ensuring that the pipeline for future women leaders remains open and remains active? Perhaps this is a momentary blip, perhaps a temporary setback that we will overcome once life starts to return back to some type of normal. And I do not have all the answers, but these studies absolutely made me take a big pause and to really think about the potential significant impacts and to recognize that this is a topic where we need to be intentional, we need to be visible, and we need to be courageous because the stakes are simply too high without that. With that, I would be thrilled to answer any questions that you might have.
Wendy, thank you so much for those insights. I know I learned a lot from what you shared with us, and I'm sure the audience also did. And do you mind if we go to some questions now? So one of our listeners wants to know if you have any resources or suggestions for mentor programs to develop young female talent.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I would tap in to the services or programs that your company may have. I know that at Cigna, I'm very fortunate to know that we have a tremendous amount of resources and programs that are available. So the first thing I would do is check with your HR team, check with your manager to see what resources may be available. The second thing, if your company doesn't maybe have formal programs, find someone who you admire. Think about someone who maybe you were in a meeting with and you liked what they had to say. You liked the way they treated other people. Something about them just clicked for you. And go back to my 3 Bs. I'll put this in the category of be courageous. Ask that person if they would be willing to be your mentor. I have definitely done that in the past. I've asked people, and let me tell you, to this day, nobody has ever turned me down. It is an honor for someone to be asked to be somebody else's mentor. So those would be 2 pieces of advice I would give.
Great, thank you. Also, could you share one story from the last year that really tested your ability to lead? Yeah, so, I mentioned in my remarks about things that I use to focus on. And, I'd say that what I was really tested is this notion of burnout and stress. It was hard. I am definitely a person who gets energy from being around people. This all-day Zoom talking to computers, it really was challenging for me. But I needed to still be able to show up as a leader. But one of the things that I found is that I also needed to be authentic. I needed to let other people know that I was struggling. And I think that helps people to realize it's okay. It's okay to admit that you're struggling. It's okay to ask for help. And as I said, you've got to find those ways to recharge yourself. Find the thing that gets you going again. Because again, I'm a people person and I wasn't able to be around a lot of people. So I needed to find new ways to be able to recharge myself. So that would be an example of one of the challenges that I faced as a leader. Thank you. So in your position, you obviously lead men. Do you experience any resistance when you are leading them? And what kind of advice can you provide for overcoming this type of situation? Yeah, that's a great question. I have been fortunate, and I mentioned that I've spent the bulk of my career at Cigna, and Cigna has always been a strong supporter of lifting up women and trying to achieve that strong representation in the ranks.
So internally, I would say that I have had more supporters than detractors. I referenced the story around my current boss, who is a male, and actually some of my greatest supporters inside Cigna are other men. But I have, when I've interacted with folks outside of Cigna, I have noticed a little bit sometimes of that resistance when you walk in the room and you're one of the few females in the room. But here's what I would tell you. It goes back a little bit to the be courageous, be confident. People get more comfortable with women in the room when women show up very confident. So I would say just lean into that. Don't worry about what other people may think or do. Just show up and be you. That is the best advice that I can give.
Now, the next one, I'm going to say is a favorite question for me, is what would be the piece of advice that you will share with your younger self, given where you are now today in your career?
That's a great question. I would tell you, and I said this in my remarks, things happen for a reason. I will tell you that there were points in my career, despite the successes that I've had in my career, there were definitely some heartaches. There are moments that I look back over my career about not getting that opportunity or not being as successful as I wanted to be in a certain thing. So there were definitely heartaches, but I will tell you each and every time, it is so true. Things happen for a reason. Use those as moments to learn. I hate almost the word failure, right? People always talk about your biggest failure, right? Because I actually really think about failures as opportunities to learn. So my advice to my younger self was to, again, don't sweat it. Things happen for a reason. Learn from it. Move on. There is something way better in the future. I actually yesterday, I'm gonna steal a quote. I love stealing other people's quotes, as I said to Megan, durable lessons. I had the opportunity yesterday to actually hear from Sarah Thomas, and if folks don't recognize her name, they'll recognize the accomplishment. She was the first female official in the Super Bowl. And she used this phrase yesterday that the windshield is much bigger than the rear view mirror. And I just love the way that thinks, right? Think about the future, think about moving forward, and stop worrying about that rear view mirror. And again, use what happened in the past as lessons to learn to propel you forward.
Great. I'm curious about this one myself. What does your average day look like?
My average day? So my average day definitely starts with just getting myself grounded and started for the day. Actually, my husband makes fun of me because my routine is I get up in the morning, I get that cup of coffee, I let my dog out, and I just sit for about 45 minutes and I read the news. I read my emails. I just get caught up, get set, get into the mindset for the day. And I will tell you, one of the biggest leadership lessons that I learned is about managing your calendar and making sure that you always have these moments throughout the day to be able to take that breath, to be able to take a moment to think. I'm sure many of you, right, your days are full with meetings. You never have a moment to actually pause, think, reflect. So the morning is always about starting my day in the right mindset. And then throughout the day, making sure that I'm taking those moments to pause, reflect, to think. Throughout the day, I am moving from one thing to the other in terms of trying to figure out how we serve our customers, our clients, how we move our business forward. There's not one day that looks the same. I would say that one thing that also drives me is variety. And my days are actually packed full of a ton of variety in terms of the types of challenges and the types of problems that I'm solving each and every day.
Well, the next one is quite a timely question from our audience. Any suggestions for recruiting diverse talent without appearing disingenuous?
Yeah, so this is another place where this notion of the intentional becomes really important. And also where you have to admit a couple of things. We talk about this notion of unconscious bias. And one of the things that I've learned over the past year as I sort of leaned into these whole conversations around how we drive more diverse and inclusive environments is this notion of unconscious bias. It's not a bad thing. We all have it because unconscious bias comes simply because you haven't had that experience. So once you recognize that, okay, I've got this bias, the best way to undo the bias is to actually increase your experiences, get new experiences, get new perspectives. So one of the best things that I've done in terms of increasing my own personal hiring and recruiting of diverse talent is I'm expanding my network. My network may not have the diversity that I need. And I'm talking about diversity of color, experiences, gender, all of that, right? So let's not just, bucket one type of diverse. It's all of that. So what I have started to do is to really throw the net a little bit wider in terms of asking people for help in lifting up talent that might be interested in my opportunities. So I would encourage people to really get intentional about the recruiting and go back to this notion of asking for help. You need to ask others to help you if you are going to cast that net a bit wider and really attract some of that diverse talent. And you also need to set some goals. You need to think about holding people accountable for ensuring things like diverse candidate slates. That's something that we've started to do even more intentionally at Cigna, that we really are starting to measure and monitor the number of diverse slates we have. So again, set goals, cast that net really wide, and ask for help, because that's the only way that you're really going to be able to move the needle on that diverse candidate slate.
Well, thank you. We have time for one more question, and on that, skill assessment is subjective. How do you or how can we incorporate data to drive conversations around career development?
So, go back to what I said. You're right. It can be a little bit subjective. So you've got to ensure that you are bringing forward the great work and the great ideas that you and your team are doing each and every day. I wouldn't worry so much around, like I said, don't worry. Do I have each and every one of these skills, right? Think about the experiences that you've had and the things that may be complementary to the skills that are needed for a particular role. Now, there are certain roles where you do need a technical expertise. Remember my example of the female leader who asked me for some additional training on finance, right? So you do need to take stock of what skills might actually require some additional training and go out and get that training. And then for other skills, recognize where you can pull in very equivalent experiences and where you can use the new job to help grow and gain those new skills and experiences.
Well, Wendy, thank you so much for sharing your personal leadership story and for highlighting the uneven impact that COVID-19 had on women over these difficult 15 months. At this time, we'll head into a quick 15-minute break. We'll be back.
People say changing healthcare will take a moonshot. One company says, challenge accepted. Cigna, with new resources for physical and emotional well-being, advancing mental health with Talkspace, and making insulin more affordable for more people. Cigna is once again leading the way. So the future of healthcare may be a moonshot, but it isn't a long shot. People say changing healthcare will take a moonshot. One company says, challenge accepted. Cigna, with new resources for physical and emotional well-being, advancing mental health with Talkspace, and making insulin more affordable for more people. Cigna is once again leading the way. So the future of healthcare may be a moonshot, but it isn't a long shot.
It's like losing a piece of your heart. It is one of the most painful experiences that I will ever have. After losing my son, I wanted to advocate because I was such an advocate for him. Every day I was in the hospital with Jonathan, I would see things and I'd be like, you know, somebody needs to fix that.
These are people who have had successes in their career and for whatever reason have had to step away from that for a period of time.
It's a lot harder to come back, and I think what the Careers 2.0 program does is open that door for them.
So she's gotten to re-immerse herself in projects that support Medtronic's overall mission.
There is a large talent pool that has been trained and educated in engineering and science that has decided to leave. And how do we leverage those trained engineers and scientists with experience and bring them into our teams? This program really does kind of reiterate our commitment to women in engineering and diverse talent pools in engineering.
I think I bring a unique experience because I can see it from the doctor's point of view, I can see it from the patient's point of view, I can see it from the family's point of view. And reading that job description and the requirements was like, oh, that was like a relief kind of thing, because it's hard to explain why you've been out for 6 years, but you are qualified. So I think about him and I think about those kids that are still fighting that fight. That's what helps me provide a device that would eventually help them. So that's what's in the forefront of my mind every day. And I feel right at home.
Welcome back. ComStat is an affiliate of CBIA, and I am part of CBIA's 5-person executive leadership team, a team that features 3 women: CBIA Chief Financial Officer Mary Bergamo, myself, and our next speaker, Shannon Marimon, the Executive Director of CBIA affiliate Ready City. Shannon, good morning. We spent a lot of time over the last year connecting through Zoom calls. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in person soon.
Same, Beatrice. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here and delighted for the opportunity to speak with you all today on an issue that I care so deeply about. Ready CT is a statewide nonprofit that is focused on ensuring access and opportunity for all public school students in our state. And as an affiliate of CBIA, we're also very committed to better aligning our educational system with our workforce needs. We do so by way of policy advocacy, as well as direct programming, which involves career-connected learning, work-based learning opportunities for students, and we focus on our state's highest need school systems. I've been asked today to provide an overview of the current landscape of childcare and education in the aftermath of COVID. A tall order to cover in just 15 minutes or less, but I will do my best. There are a lot of ways to come at this topic, so I'd like to focus on where we've been, where we are now, and where we can go and should go from here. And as women who lead, we have the opportunity to be part of a remarkable transformation, and here's why. No single societal system integration was more disrupted by the pandemic than that of childcare and education. In what felt like a sweeping blow, we found ourselves in a situation that we had never imagined, and we were quite ill prepared. And when these structural supports we so heavily rely on and sometimes take for granted were shaken as a result of mandatory school closures that put employees and employers across the state, including local school systems, which employ over 95,000 full-time staff, in a veritable tailspin. I remember exactly where I was when I received the email from our superintendent of schools that our schools would be closing for an undetermined amount of time. And we thought it'd be for that state for a period of 2 to 3 weeks tops. We know now that that was wishful thinking. Overnight, people scrambled to adapt their lives to a new normal. And while some had the ability to work remotely, others did not have that option, which resulted in making hard choices between earning a paycheck and attending the well-being of their children. Even for those who were able to transition to remote work, the trade-offs have been significant. No doubt working parents, including many of you attending today's conference, can attest to the mixed emotions you've navigated this past year, fluctuating between waves of panic about health and safety, moments of grief for lives threatened or lost, and extreme guilt for failing your children. And all along, you may have been required to remain calm, cool, and collected for your own team of employees who have been navigating these very same challenges alongside you. I've described this past year as an eerie Darwinian experiment that sought to demonstrate who in our society can grin and bear it best. However, the first time a version of this phrase left my lips, I caught myself. Grinning and bearing it has been the name of the game for working parents since well before a pandemic arrived on our doorstep. Working parents have routinely performed acrobatics in order to make the patchwork schedule of childcare, school, and school vacations compatible with the realities of varying work schedules and increased expectations around performance and productivity. Over the past 15 months, that steady state of affairs became extreme sport, aired on a broadcast channel for all to see. This reality ran parallel to a public education system in something of a crisis. An education system that is not traditionally adapted well to large-scale changes, much less one that required leveraging virtual tools and technology overnight. And it was all very messy and continues to be in some places. So now, with science successfully battling back the pandemic, where does that leave us and what happens next? Where do we have the opportunity as women and leaders to lead, to affect real meaningful change in ways that can benefit all? So let's start with a "you are here" moment. What is the current state of play? We're still getting our bearings on the state of our childcare and education systems in the wake of COVID, and there's no shortage of data to prove the points we know all too well. First, the disruption to our childcare and education systems has had an outsized impact on working women, as we've already heard this morning. A study by the journal Gender and Society characterized the matter as a tidal wave of women leaving the workforce in 2020, more than 2 million by some accounts, and mostly to attend to the education of their children. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, people of color and women with caregiving responsibilities bore the brunt of the pandemic in the United States and around the globe, with unemployment rates among Black and Hispanic women reaching double digits. Then there are the great losses suffered by the early childcare industry. There has been an overall decrease in the number of available childcare slots since many providers closed their programs temporarily or for good, as they were unable to sustain operations due to diminishing enrollment. A U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation report found that 86% of childcare centers are now serving significantly fewer children than prior to COVID, and on average, enrollment has been down 67%. And then there's the K-12 system, which experienced disruption at a truly global scale, although we felt it profoundly at the local level. We have witnessed reduced learning time and significant learning loss for millions of students, hundreds of thousands just here in Connecticut. And the pandemic has exacerbated well-documented opportunity gaps and digital divides, some of the worst of which already existed here in our state, that put low-income students at an even greater disadvantage relative to their better-off peers, which no doubt leaves much-needed untapped talent on the table for employers in high-growth, high-demand industries such as manufacturing, information technology, and healthcare. There may not be agreement on what happens next, but when we think about where we are, there is some agreement that COVID exposed a tenuous infrastructure for ensuring the welfare and education of our youngest citizens as it relates to the changing nature of work and the where, when, and how work and education can be done. Something's got to give. So where do we go from here when admittedly even small changes go against human nature, much less reimagining long-standing institutional dynamics? We crave what's familiar and status quo, maybe now more than ever, and it's easy to see why. Pursuing the unknown can cause great discomfort and fear, and right now we long for routine and comfort. But despite this temptation, some are already working toward transformation and new opportunities. Here's an example. In light of recent events, an unlikely collaboration among business, philanthropy, and nonprofit partners formed with the goal of understanding the existent and persistent challenges of early childcare. This goal was made more relevant than ever given the need to get women and men back to work and/or retained within the workforce. This collaboration seeks not just to understand our childcare system, to get it back up on life support, but to offer something better. In recent months, the Connecticut Early Childhood Funders Collaborative, CBIA, Social Venture Partners Connecticut, and Ready CT produced a childcare needs survey for employers so that solutions could be designed and implemented. The survey found that employers learn about employees' childcare needs on an ad hoc basis based on employee inquiries, lateness, or absenteeism. The survey illuminated that the biggest issue overall is affordability of childcare, and employers experience reduced workforce reliability and productivity as a result of childcare issues. That survey directly informed the creation of a comprehensive toolkit that can help lead employees through childcare challenges, thereby increasing productivity and helping to recruit and retain talent. This toolkit provides at your fingertips resources for employees, like links to 211 support, home visiting services, and birth to 3 programs, while providing employers with details on creating employee discounts at childcare centers, providing emergency backup care options, and educating employees on childcare tax credits. I'm hoping we can put the toolkit and actually the press release that went out alongside it a couple of months ago into the feed, so you can all access that resource. This cross-sector collaboration sought to create something new and improved out of less than optimal circumstances. And as with early childcare, consider that there is also something better to be created in K-12 public education through cross-sector collaboration that includes you, women who lead. Remember, the current K-12 public education model as we know it was built on an industrial age production line mode of schooling. It hasn't been truly updated in over a century, despite the exponential growth of technology in just the last decade. Automation, Industry 4.0, and information overload are advancing and transforming the full complement of public and private businesses and institutions, and yet public education has been stubbornly impenetrable to change. In his book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, Yuval Noah Harari writes, "The last thing a teacher needs to give her pupils is more information. They already have far too much of it. Instead, people need the ability to make sense of information, to tell the difference between what is important and what is unimportant, and above all, to combine many bits of information into a broad picture of the world." So what should we be teaching? Many experts argue that schools should switch to teaching the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. To stay relevant, not just economically, but above all socially, graduates of our education system will need the ability to constantly learn and reinvent themselves. And yet we still think of learning in a clock in, clock out fashion. The day's schedule is set and time is the constant, when in fact, time should be the variable and learning should be the constant. This might seem a daunting undertaking, upending the static school day because it upends the static workday. An element of pragmatism must remain as we consider the operational and logistical aspects of learning environments. Then again, in the wake of COVID-19, the workplace is different. Shifts are happening, and this can be aligned with investment in high quality childcare and education as we consider new roles for schools, school systems, and even educators and community-based organizations. In fact, there may be more flexible, individualized schedules that work for a far wider range of students, educators, and working parents. When strategically mapping where public education can go, I urge you to question what is known. So much of what we know about learning is based on data collected in school buildings. Yet, as writer and filmmaker Carol Black puts it, collecting data on human learning based on children's behavior in school is like collecting data on killer whales based on their behavior at SeaWorld. Black goes on to point out that our data is based on outcomes for children artificially channeled into same age peer groups instead of by mixed age communities defined by learning level. We compel children to be indoors and sedentary for most of the day and ask them to learn from text-based artificial materials instead of contextualized real-world activities. Remember what I said earlier is true. The US public education system circa 2021 is based on an outdated model. The industrial model itself has changed and adapted. Even a cursory look at the transition to manufacturing is evidence of that, where computer science, robotics, and artificial intelligence now dominate the industry. Conversely, inertia plagues our public education system. We are now poised to go back to the status quo unless we act now. As leaders, you can join with those resisting that gravitational pull. Educators and researchers at Columbia University have developed a new framework, Rise to Thrive, which I also hope can be posted as a resource, which poses the question, how might we design an education system that prepares every child of every race and background to thrive in school and in life? It breaks the mold, it's exciting, and it's being piloted right here in Connecticut. Our organization, Ready CT, is working with the Columbia Group, and the goals are inspiring. So all this brings me back to what I said earlier about asking you to be part of a remarkable transformation at this unique and unprecedented moment in time. Quote unquote normal childcare and public education have not really served students or our workforce well for years. It has failed to keep pace with what learning should be, not to mention the thousands of students being left behind in critical skills, or the mismatch between the preparation of our high school graduates and the needs of employers. If you are compelled by the potential for reimagining our essential systems of childcare and education, connect with us at Ready CT. As women who lead, there is much more we can do through cross-sector collaboration and innovation in order to revamp the support and development of our youth. And as a result, we will prepare a diverse workforce community ready for whatever comes their way. We welcome discussions with you regarding any and all aspects of this effort, whether it be through capacity building, support to school systems, work-based learning efforts, shifting the public discourse, or pulling on key policy levers. So let's talk. We are grateful for the opportunity to join this important event today, and please know we sincerely welcome the opportunity to work with you. And thank you to our affiliates, CBIA and CONSTEP, for their efforts in advancing the space where public education meets workforce development. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Shannon. We'll be right back after this message from Stanley Black & Decker, one of today's sponsors.
This year will be 100 years of women gaining the right to vote, which was a huge accomplishment. But there's a lot of unconscious bias that exists today still. Women are just generally steered into certain career paths. When I first started out in my career, I didn't think there were any barriers. My mom had always told me that I could do whatever I wanted. What I found when I was in the workforce, though, that there were a lot more opportunities to really trip up. Oftentimes, you are the only female at a meeting, the only one that shares a certain viewpoint on a topic. In addition to working a full-time job, women are often the primary caregivers for their children, for their home, and for their parents. The question we really want to answer is what we can do to create an equal environment and equal opportunities for women looking to accelerate and advance their careers as men have done. At Stanley Black & Decker, we've signed on to gender parity by the year 2030. We're putting together a lot of programs and initiatives to create an environment that women need to really be successful. We support Green Light for Girls and STEAM education programs in the communities where our employees live and work. We're working with incredible women outside of the company as well and breaking down barriers around the world. Female role models support other women in the workforce and give them that confidence to raise their hand and saying, yes, me. I want to do it, and I know I can do a great job. I wish that someone had told me years ago to not feel guilty about being a working mom. Gender equality is where my daughter can grow up and not even think about gender equality being an issue.
Next are 5 outstanding change makers representing a number of leading Connecticut companies: Bigelow Tea, Otis Elevators, Medtronic, and InCord. This morning's conversation is moderated by CBIA's board member, Moy Ogilvie, managing partner for McCarter English Hartford office. Moy, good morning.
Good morning, Beatrice. Thank you very much. We are all really excited to continue the discussion that's been going on this morning. I know we are all inspired by what we've heard so far from all of the speakers. So thank you to CBIA for continuing this conference, even in this remote way. And we are all ready for this discussion. It's going to be informative. There will not be enough time because these women are all phenomenal, but we're going to get through as much as we can. And if there are time for questions at the end, we will do those. So today's panel, we are going to focus really on the past year, what 2020 and beyond has taught us about leadership. And these women are going to share some of their experiences at their corporations and businesses. So let me just briefly introduce the panelists. I will beg you to look at their bios. They are so extremely impressive, but I'm just going to highlight their names and titles right now, but please take a minute and look at their bios if you have not when we are done with this program today. So first we have Cindi Bigelow, who is the president and CEO of Bigelow Tea. And I think everyone knows or should know they are the U.S. market leader in specialty teas, and they are also a family-owned business for many generations. We also have with us Robin Fiala, who is the vice president of sales and marketing of Otis. And also everyone should know that Otis is the global leader in making and installing elevators and escalators. We also have Valerie Finarty, who is the Vice President Operations and Surgical Innovations for Medtronic, which is one of the largest medical device companies in the world. And then last but not least, we have Meredith Shay, who is the CEO of InCord, which is the largest manufacturer of custom safety netting in North America. And Meredith is so beyond impressive. She became CEO of this company around the age or just before the age of 30. So kudos to her. And all of these women are impressive. And we're going to get going and talk a little bit more about this past year. And first, we just want to talk about characteristics of leaders during the time of crisis. And if you could all share what you think are some characteristics that leaders had to use and show during the time of crisis. Either you displayed it or you saw other leaders do it well. If you could just share, and anybody can go first.
I'm happy to go first if you'd like. First of all, ladies, it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to be with you this morning and chat and share some stories. I'm sure we have more similar stories than we could ever imagine. For me, it was, several lessons learned about what was the qualities needed. First one was patience. I think we needed to know when we needed to act and when we needed to listen more. But besides patience, there was really, for me during the crisis, the ability to really reassess at a faster speed than anything I could imagine. We were putting plans in place, and within 3 hours, those plans really had run its course, and now you needed to change plans. And so, patience, reassessment, listening, and then I guess the last one I would really say is you can't panic. They can't see you at all, not being able to deal with everything that's coming your way. And so for me, it was really showing a steady hand and really leading the ship, although reassessing and moving in a lot of different directions, really showing that we're going to be okay.
Thanks, Cindi. Anyone else?
Hi. Go ahead, Robin. Sorry, this is Robin, and again, I feel very honored to be here with these women on this panel, as well as to share with you some of our stories at Otis. It's been a phenomenal year for us. In addition to managing through a pandemic, we also spun out from United Technologies and become our own publicly traded company that's caused us to, in many ways, do a lot of what Cindi just described, and maybe just a couple of the additional leadership traits that I would just maybe suggest is really truly listening. I think a lot of us think we listen, but I think it's taught us to listen and engage with not just our employees, but our customers, and in our case, our writing public, in ways that we never, maybe had to in the past. I think it's also taught us to really be agile and flexible, and move, as Cindi said, at a pace that one could never imagine in the past. And then finally, I'll just talk about sort of being innovative, right? We've had to think about creative and new solutions for problems that, a week ago hadn't existed, right? So we had to kind of really think outside the box and really leverage, I think, a lot of different levers than perhaps we had to in the past.
Great. Thanks, Robin.
Thanks. Just a couple things to add to that, if I may. Hello, everyone. Hello, Moy. Thanks for having me. I would just add that, this was a very different type of crisis, right? So most of us, our whole lives, we've dealt with various, crises, right? For me personally, it might be a tornado or a hurricane or a major supplier disruption. But I think in the past year, the crises have been different because it's impacted more than maybe brick and mortar plants, right? For operations, at least. It's impacted our team members, their families, whole communities in ways that I think previous crises haven't. And so, some of the things that I had to do differently was really think through empathy and putting myself in the shoes of some of our team members and what they were going through maybe at home or in their community. So I think empathy was a big one. And the other one was really communication, honing those communication skills, because that was really critical. People wanted to hear from their leaders. The messages may be really tough and in some cases not what they wanted to hear, but really bringing forth facts in a humble and truthful way, I think was appreciated and helped establish trust long-term.
That's great. Meredith, anything to add?
Yeah, I realized with how rapidly everything was changing that we needed a framework for decision making. And as a leader, if I led by having decisions made out of love instead of fear and could allow the rest of our company to make decisions that way, we'd have a way to make decisions that everybody could be happy with the end results, knowing that we did it in that way. And it was the best we could do with the information that we had at the time.
Thank you. And thank you all for just sharing some of those ideas, because we could have a whole discussion just on that alone. But I think for the attendees, I think it's just helpful for them to hear from you all some of the characteristics that you had to have or that you've seen that are really helpful at times of crisis. But let's go into a little bit about some of examples of some of the general challenges that you all had in terms of running your business and keeping your workforce going over the past year. And again, whoever wants to start first.
I could start. My father passed away on March 8th of 2020. He was the owner of the company. So in addition to pretty tragic circumstances, we had a company without an owner and had to pretty quickly adapt to a changing environment with the pandemic, as well as a changing environment for a company. During those first 2 weeks, I have a 1 and 3-year-old. So I learned pretty quickly that they weren't going to be returning to school after spring break. And so those were some pretty significant challenges that we saw within the first 2 weeks of everything happening that we had to address as a company, as a family, as owners of business.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I know on behalf of all of us, we send condolences for your loss, but thank you for sharing that, definitely.
I'll provide a little perspective on, just from a manufacturing standpoint. I think our biggest challenge is because we make, life-saving equipment and medical equipment. We had to, keep going, right? So whereas some businesses might have been able to kind of shift, which we did, for a good portion of our business, But in manufacturing, we had to quickly pivot to being able to maintain operations and ensuring we had a very safe work environment for our employees. So that was probably the biggest challenge, right? In our factories, we had to very quickly get personal protective equipment, which was in short supply. We had to do social distancing, so we had to lay out some of our lines. We had to do screening, right? And contact tracing. And so that was probably some of the biggest challenges to keep, the factories running. But you also had to make sure that your workforce still wanted to come to work, right? So you had to make sure that we would communicate effectively that it was going to be a safe environment, that they could come into work, and all the things that we were putting in place. So from an operations perspective, those were probably the biggest challenges. And then there's a whole nother set of challenges, maybe somebody else can touch on from a working from home and virtual work.
For myself, first of all, Meredith, I'm very sorry. No matter what I say today in terms of what I had to deal with, I can't even imagine what you had to go through, to be honest. That's at a whole nother level. But, for me, I think, I can relate to what you're saying about manufacturing and then having an office as well and blending that. And I think what I really learned early on is that, again, we were talking about you're used to tornadoes or whatever you're dealing with in your businesses. All of a sudden, all of us were dealing with an emotional spectrum that we have never seen before. Of all the things we deal with, I think they're usually business forward. And in this particular case, we were dealing with emotions that covered. And so we would have, the manufacturing team, we have 400 employees. And 300 of them are in manufacturing. So we need to create that safe environment and bring them in during times where they were receiving tremendous pressure from the press, their family, their own particular fears. At the same time, in the office, again, same pressures. And you really had to try to look at all of the emotions and then try to base it on, yes, empathy. And I appreciate what Mary said about love, but also facts and bringing everybody sort of into a center spot. That was very difficult to do, especially early on. It's still difficult to do, but it was really challenging at the beginning. And so for me, when you ask, what is this that I learned about myself? I learned that I thought humility was important. Humility is essential. Because as soon as you think you have the answer, you didn't have the answer anymore. So I guess it was really reinforcing, I would say, at the beginning of COVID and where we are today. Humility is the biggest characteristic that I've learned, that you need to really think about that even at a higher level.
No, that's great. Humility is essential. Yeah, definitely. Robin, anything else to add with regard to challenges that you faced with your company?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the one thing that I would just add is that, with our 60,000 employees around the world, the challenges we faced, while very similar in each country, definitely had its unique differences for a variety of different reasons. What our employees faced in the local markets, and we have employees, both in the office and in factories, but also a significant number of our employees, essential workers on the front line, installing and servicing equipment and infrastructures like hospitals, et cetera. So we had to, figure out ways to really quickly mobilize those folks, make sure that they were safe, make sure they had the proper PPE, and in over 150 countries and territories around the world, which each posed its own unique requirements, challenges, struggles. So I think that was one of the things that, let's say, certainly early on in the pandemic, that was critical for us and critical for our customers, and really figuring out how to deal with that and collaborate and support each other, and really have not just the empathy, but the leadership and ownership to help make it all happen. So again, I think the organization learned a lot, and really supporting and acting more as a global enterprise than sort of really trying to kind of go fight these fires, singularly on their own.
No, thank you for that. And also, I think it's great, and you all touched on it, the idea that so many of you have as workers, the frontline workers, the essential workers, the ones who had to be there to keep the companies and businesses going, while many of us were able to do what we did from our homes or certainly places where we could guarantee our safety a little bit more. So it's important that you all mentioned that and the challenges of that. And obviously you all did it well and did it successfully. One thing, and we've heard this all morning, and this is a conference about women and for women. So let's talk about even more about the pandemic's impact on women. And there's a lot of data that's out there that shows that many of the jobs that were lost were women's jobs. Many women work in the leisure, hospitality, retail, all those things that shut down, frankly, right? And so that on one level was a huge loss in terms of work opportunities. And then also, as Wendy mentioned earlier, there was the McKinsey reports. And McKinsey reports really looked how women in corporate America have been impacted during the pandemic. And I'll just read the quote. And again, it was talked a little bit about this morning, but the pandemic had a near immediate effect on women's employment. 1 in 4 women are considering leaving the workforce or downshifting their careers versus 1 in 5 men. While all women have been impacted, 3 major groups have experienced some of the largest challenges: working mothers, women in senior management, and Black women. So going from there, I just want to talk a little bit about what you all experienced in terms of leading your workforce and the challenges that really came to the forefront, in particular for women, right? Women who have children, women who were taking on the brunt of elder care, and parents in general, of course. And just let's talk a little bit more deeper about that. So in your companies, what did you see and how did you help your employees navigate? Who wants to go first?
I'm just laughing that Robin has 60,000 employees and we have 400, and how is she ever going to end? Okay, that's a tough one with 60,000 employees. Even with 400, it was a tough one to try to address. And I guess for me, we try to look at, again, we're so much smaller, really, than both, Robin and Valerie's company, for sure, in terms of number of employees and the global impact, et cetera. But we just try to listen to each case individually. And again, it's very difficult. You have frontline workers that need the teabag machines need to run. And you have a marketing individual or a customer service individual. And so there were 2 different worlds we were balancing, which was actually hard for me because, we sort of try to run the organization based on fairness, and there was already something that was not fair. And I had to wrestle with that, to be honest. So we were sensitive, and obviously I'd like to think we were sensitive in both cases. We heard every case. We allowed the employee to do what they needed to do. Obviously no one was going to lose their job over that. It's interesting, it wasn't just females. We actually had males having the same issue, not to the same degree in terms of numbers, but it was really one-on-one, allowing them to do what they needed to do. In some cases, we were able to work with one of the organizations here in Bridgeport workplace, and they had services that were available, childcare services, etc. We already had a major childcare desert in the state. It only got much worse after COVID, but then help work with them to try to get them childcare. So again, small enough family business that we were able to sort of hopefully do whatever was necessary to help get through this pandemic, job security, and offering services when available.
Thanks. Cindi, anyone else?
Yeah, very, very similar. I think, at Medtronic, we have been working very hard to differentiate in the area of gender diversity, really hard over the last several years, investing and attracting, retaining, and promoting women. And, while we continue to advocate for women through various networks and employee resource groups, we have received feedback from a lot of women about how the pandemic burdens, being shouldered by women, and women of color in particular, is putting some of those gains at risk. Cindy mentioned childcare. It's derailing work days, even women trying to work from home with kids, bouncing around in the background, and everybody just really needed to be okay with that. But I think what it's presented now, when we are doing some surveys about return to office, right? Everybody's been working, but it's return to office. We have seen a discrepancy between our male team members who maybe want to come back to work more days per week, and the female who wants to maybe come back to work a couple days a week. So one thing that we are doing, in addition to what was done during the pandemic, right, where we offered childcare stipends and more flexible time and things like that. Going forward, I think a big thing we need to consider is a potential hybrid model. And leveraging that, because I think that's going to be the expectation, perhaps going forward. And from some of the articles I've read, is that our workforce is going to perhaps expect more flexibility with a hybrid model. And I think in particular, women will be looking for that. I think about when I was starting in my career, and my kids are older now, but when they were very young, I would have given my left arm for like a 1 day a week to work from home just to get some stuff done. So I think that's going to be a big part of the go forward plan.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that.
Maybe I'll just add, broadly for us at Otis, women represent more than a third of our executives globally and 40% in the US. So it's something that Otis takes very seriously and has been promoting and working through for a number of years. At the same time, we've just recently, committed to join Paradigm for Parity. We're the first in our industry, and it really goes to just our overall commitment to reach gender parity at the executive level by 2030. And I think this really kind of speaks to, like I said, sort of our culture, of being sort of the innovators in our industry and really committing to this, as I said, really on a global level. It's it just poses different challenges as you work, at the scale in the kind of countries that we operate in. And so I'm very proud of what Otis is doing. At the same time, I think, there's other things that we've done that I encourage folks to think about in terms of employee resource groups, mentorship programs, because I think, as we all say, it does take a village. And I think a lot of times, at least my experience has been, is these women tend to feel isolated. They feel alone in their challenge. Maybe they're only surrounded by men, and they don't see how to do it. They don't see the light. They don't see that there's a way to do it. And so, putting them into, situations where they can connect with others to learn about, okay, how have you done it? I'm a mother of 3. I'm a working executive. I travel globally. So I share my ideas with people, and I share my network with people. People, not just me, who figured it out, but other people have figured it out. It's not easy. But giving people that network and those lifelines to, brainstorm and learn from, I think is critical for folks, even more critical right now for all the reasons we just described. So that would be my offer for folks.
Yeah, I think that point you made about isolation and really thinking that you're alone and nobody is going through what you've gone through. And I think that's why conferences also like these are really important. So you can hear that there are so many others, whether it's in your workplace or at other workplaces, that are going through similar challenges, and you're not alone. And I think as women leaders, I think, women have worked so hard to get so many opportunities in all different industries. And to the thought of 1 year derailing a lot of what has been done over decades for, people whose shoulders that we all stand on, I think it just hopefully motivates us all as women leaders to really look at this issue in a deeper way than we probably did prior to the pandemic. And then, so Meredith, I want to give you a chance to also talk on this topic. I know you have two really young ones at home, and it's interesting, you being one of the leader at your company, and I'm sure everyone's watching how you are doing this and how you're handling it, and how that reflects in your workplace.
So we have a pretty strong manufacturing base. We're about 50-50 male and female for all the departments at our company. And what we found was things might not be fair. So we really tried to separate what was an effect of the pandemic on somebody's attendance or their performance versus what was something that was in their control. And we tried, on a unique basis to help people with those childcare issues or things out of their control, to be able to address them so that they could continue to work and feel successful, and we could continue to get what needed to get done as a company. And I had a lot of compassion because I was right there in it with everybody else. So I think that was a big lesson learned, just for helping people get through really difficult, unique situations and understanding it was going to be different for every single person, how we could help them through it, but that we had to do it together. That was the only way we were going to get out of this. And on the manufacturing side, we did 2 shifts, which helped out quite a bit with a lot of the families to be able to work with their support network to have childcare maybe during these hours and not these, so that they could still work full time. But we chose to be flexible with the hours so that they could, do the schooling at home virtually or find that childcare that was needed to do their job.
That's great. Anyone else? I just
want to add one thing and ask the other ladies on the panel here. For me, what was interesting was there was a greater awareness of the impact on women. So what does that mean? I've now heard stories for, we've had manufacturing. One of our shifts starts at 4 a.m. and these off hours where daycare isn't really available. And they used to literally have to wake a child up and bring them to the relative's house and then get here by 4 o'clock in the morning. What does that look like? And I think prior, to be honest, the pandemic, I was more like, okay, once you enter in the door, how am I creating the best environment possible for you, where you would feel engaged, respected, and we provide you with the proper benefits. Now I'm looking further down that journey to get into the door that I really wasn't aware of. Does that mean we have the solutions? We do not. But I'm working as part of the Governor Workforce Council, and the area I'm working on, it includes childcare. And when they talk about childcare, they're still talking about probably those standard hours. And what are we doing for individuals? Again, in my case, the manufacturing area, those hours are not always standard. So again, it's just a greater awareness. At least that's all I can say right now. I have a greater awareness, and I'm trying to think about, when we're thinking about solutions, I think more inclusive solutions than are currently on the table.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I think we all tend to look at things from our own situation. So we're thinking from the 9 to 5ers or what have you. But as you said, like, you have a workforce that you need to be inclusive of how it impacts them, right? And those who work the night shift or the evening shift, or those who have, are doing it all by themselves, perhaps, and as opposed to having, a spouse or family support systems. So definitely that inclusivity and that empathy is so important. And I think we've all learned that we perhaps can do a lot more and think a lot more about those issues. And this is a perfect segue into the topic of workplace culture and employee well-being. This year we dealt with the pandemic, the medical crisis, then remote work, the challenges and the newness of that for most companies. Then we had the social and racial justice issues full force right around the same time, and then also the political issues. So, I mean, you couldn't imagine a scenario like what we've just gone through. But with all that, it impacted all of our employees in different ways. All of those things impacted our employees in different ways. And it seemed that this was the first time that I can remember, at least, that employers had to actually really think about, how do we deal with our employees' well-being? How do we make sure, to the extent we can, that they are okay, you know, to take care of their families, okay, then to also continue doing the work of the company, et cetera. Like, we couldn't ignore it anymore. We couldn't just say, like, let's just look at what happens when they're in our walls, right? And how things externally are impacting them. Let's talk a little bit about what either you did with your companies or within the divisions that you run to deal with, you know, well-being and addressing the fact that there was a lot going on, and none of us have ever gone through anything like this. Who wants to go first?
I can talk about a few of, you know, the things that we did, but again, most of the team members on my staff, you know, and that group continued to go to the sites, right? Which presented, you know, a different aspect. But the broader organization, you know, they still felt good about what they were doing, continuing to manufacture and support health and life-saving products. But some of the other folks, right? I think the key things here were listening to the staff, right? And talking about well-being, right? Before, you know, I've kind of been at this for 25 years, and we didn't have a lot of conversations just about how people were doing in the past. So I think one thing that's been brought, you know, to the forefront is just having those conversations with employees about how they're feeling, how they're doing. And then also just providing the resources and the communication, you know, that it's okay to not be okay sometimes, right? Because there were new stressors introduced that people hadn't had to deal with in the past. And then, you know, I think we also did some training, right? There was quite a bit of unconscious bias training. There were statements from our company about kind of where that we stood as a company. That was made very clear to people. So that was helpful. Like, this is us, and this is where we stand on this issue. And that really, I think, contributed to people seeking to understand more. You know, there were a lot of sessions around just having conversations with some of our resource groups, right? Whether it's our African Descent Network or our Asian Network or Pride or whatever, having those conversations about inclusivity and opening up the dialogue quite a bit more. And maybe for some of the office personnel, at least, all of the Zoom calls helped foster some of those conversations, I think, in a different way as well. So I think communication, enhanced training, and then just the dialogue around well-being were kind of the three focus areas for us.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think what you said is what a lot of companies try to do and implement. And I'd be curious too, also, you know, yesterday was the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And I think a lot of companies, you know, of course, at the moment we say, oh my gosh, we have to address it, your employees and your customers, and everyone's expecting you to address it. But now we're a year out, and, like, you know, going forward, do you see your companies saying, like, you know what, we are going to stick with this, and we are going to try and be part of the solution? Again, we all play such a tiny role in our world, communities, but in our workplace, like, we can do something. So is there any company that's trying to continue this post-pandemic, you know, this 1 year anniversary?
Maybe Moy, I'll talk a little bit about what Otis has done. You know, about a year ago, we launched a campaign called Our Commitment to Change. And I think what it did was really, on a whole scale effort, you know, really, you know, showed our employees, you know, our overall commitment really and framework to ensure that really everyone felt that their voices were heard, that they feel safe, that their opinions were welcome. and had a voice in the company. And I think, to do that, we hired an expert in diversity and inclusion to really come in and sort of assess our programs and look at, where our gaps were, help us understand some of the best practices that were out there, and really kind of helped us lay out, okay, what are the things you should do? How do you phase this in? And how do you really kind of put your money where your mouth is, so to speak? Kind of to your point, it's like one thing to, kind of create some communication, and it's another thing of how do you show action and how do you continue to show action? So I think, what's exciting to me is how Otis has done that. We actually, this morning, we just released our ESG strategy that starts to put some more commitment and teeth into that program. Talks about our investment in STEM as well, and really, helping to build that talent pipeline, across the organization for the future, or across the world, let's say, for the future. So again, I think it's some, it's not just kind of creating some thoughts around it, but really, how do you create some very strong commitments and hold yourself accountable to your employees for it as well.
Thank you, Robin. That's great. And I think also, I would guess in many of the companies, there's a lot of women who lead on those issues and have really been able to take their companies to a different level. So we should celebrate that too and continue that. So, all right, we're almost running out of time, but so I just want to do two quick questions with you. For what was your thing that you did during your self-care thing that you did during the pandemic? So we heard earlier that Wendy, it was the Peloton. What did you start that you're going to continue?
I started gardening.
Okay, nice.
It was wonderful. I'll continue that for a long time, I think.
All right, anyone else?
I spent a lot more time with my kids and tried to start exercising a bit more. The good news is my dog lost 10 pounds. I did not, but my dog was a bit heavy, lost 10. So that was happy.
It always goes. Anyone else?
Well, I've been in the office from day one, so my routine has not changed that much, to be honest. And the hours have certainly not gotten any better over the last year. So, I don't know, just for me, it's just trying to continue trying to be mindful that I need time for me, whether it's that hour in the morning from 7 to 8 where I can either do emails or I can read whatever I want to read or practice my Spanish or whatever I want to do. Just really not finding time for anything new, but really just being mindful that I still need some time. I cannot let the business, I cannot let COVID consume me, although it's consumable. And so I just try to stay true to that.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I feel the same way Cindi does. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, it did consume me, right? And so my routine did change. Instead of traveling all the time, I was at home, but I was on calls from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, so it felt all consuming. And so one of the things I changed was I began blocking time for me, again, even if it was to take a quick walk or, get a drink or something. But I think, just as you said, Cindi, making time a little bit for yourself to decompress, because I no longer had that drive or that flight that allowed me that opportunity to have some time to myself. And so, yeah, that would be what I would say.
No, and that's all great. So thank you for sharing that with the audience, because it's important. If we don't take care of ourselves, then we're not going to be any use to our businesses or our families. And we have to acknowledge and give ourselves grace and time to, recoup. So we're going to end with one question from the audience, and it's perfect because we're all transitioning to this post-pandemic world. And the question from this audience member: for women who are now working from home and are still trying to build their career and grow, how do you ensure that you still are included in those big meetings, opportunities, et cetera? And when the physical work, it was already a challenge with the physical workplace to assert yourself. So how do you do that if you're not always in the physical workspace? Or just any tips, closing tips that you all could share with our audience?
Yeah, one thing that several women have reached out to me, and they're just establishing kind of a routine, kind of one-on-one and mentoring. I think that's been impactful because it even if you were in different offices or different parts of the world, you didn't have to kind of be connected in the same room. I think one thing this has done is because our work hours have expanded a little bit. So, those one-on-one meetings, I'm still having folks kind of reach out and establish those to make those connections. We've also done some virtual meetups. And so if you want to kind of put yourself out there and establish a coffee hour or a happy hour or something like that, I think that will kind of keep your network open as well. And I've seen a lot of folks doing that as an idea.
Great. Anyone else? All right. You all were wonderful. As I said, we would not have enough time. We could talk for hours, but you were great. And hopefully the audience got some great advice and motivation and inspiration hearing the three of you. So thank you to Cindi, Robin, Meredith, and Valerie. Thank you to CBIA for having us all. And with that, we're going to go back to B.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Moy, Cindi, Meredith, Robin, and Valerie, thank you so much for your candor and insight this morning in discussing the challenges you faced through the last year, the struggle to maintain work-life balance, and the lessons you learned to help your company and your teams move forward in the future. We'll pause here for another break and return shortly at 10:55.
People say changing healthcare will take a moonshot. One company says, challenge accepted. Cigna, with new resources for physical and emotional well-being, advancing mental health with Talkspace, and making insulin more affordable for more people. Cigna is once again leading the way. So the future of healthcare may be a moonshot, but it isn't a long shot.
Everything is all about our mission, alleviating pain, restoring health, extending life in the medical device industry.
Of course, mission's everything. I mean, it's why we do what we do. I think you would be hard-pressed to find an engineer who isn't doing the work for the patients that they can help.
I have the mission kind of tacked on my computer, my PC, where I see it every day. I know a lot of people talk about, I work for a company that's very mission-driven, but here you actually get to see it on a day-to-day basis.
I think the culture of Medtronic is really centered around the patient, and I think this is shared with all the employees. It's like in my DNA, so this is why we do this, and I would not even question that.
You know that the work you're doing, it's actually going to make somebody's life better. Not one person's life better, like millions of person's life better. It's like you're giving somebody a new life.
Part of the reason why I stay with this industry is there are so many patients that I want to help. So maybe those patients can stay longer and have a family, be productive.
We're really driven by the people that use our products. And I think part of that is that we are the people that use our products. Our family members, our friends, our neighbors, our community.
Whatever project I'm working on, that could be my uncle, that could be my grandmother.
In high school, I got exposed to engineering and what it really is, and it's about solving problems. It's about being able to take those technical skills and make a difference in the world.
For me, learning and curiosity, I'm very curious.
My mom and I would fix everything. If the dishwasher was broken, the two of us would fix it. I want to be involved in something like that.
The harmonization of the math and science and feeling like you could make a difference.
We build something that really has to work always and all the time.
I get to work on very innovative technology, very cutting edge. That's what I aspire to do.
Everything's growing very fast, engineering, AI, robotics. So it's exciting to have to learn new things every day.
I also feel challenged, and that's really important to me, and that is something that makes me excited to come to work every day. I really want to make sure we're pushing ourselves, pushing our boundaries, trying new things. It's okay to fail. We are in a nourishing environment here that allows that.
Diversity in problem solving is incredibly important because if you don't have different voices at the table from backgrounds, experiences, you're going to be limited in the problem space that you can go solve.
With that perspective, you know that you're learning something new every day because each person has a different take.
What I've really appreciated about Medtronic is I feel like as a woman engineer, you can be your authentic self and really bring your best self and your skills to the table.
It's really satisfying to be able to wake up every day and come to a place that I know genuinely cares and really wants to make a difference in populations today, but also the future generations.
People say changing healthcare will take a moonshot. One company says, challenge accepted. Cigna, with new resources for physical and emotional well-being, advancing mental health with Talkspace, and making insulin more affordable for more people. Cigna is once again leading the way. So the future of healthcare may be a moonshot, but it isn't a long shot.
My name is Alejandra Parra. I'm originally from Colombia.
I migrated to the United States at the age of 16.
I'm an African-born immigrant who's a Black woman. On any given day, there's a number of reasons that someone may not fully understand who I am. But I view that as an opportunity to be an educator.
You could work in technology like I do. You could work in the sciences. You could become an engineer.
I'm one of 5 women in a 30-person team. The men on my team not only see me as a coworker, but as a peer, as a professional.
Being with a company for 15 years, you build your network. And you know who to go to. I've had a great experience being a female at Raytheon.
Momentum is an amazing thing. If you can leverage the strength and power of who you are to push yourself forward and inch just one step further, then others will see you moving.
It's a little bit easier now that there are more women in the room because we help each other.
So I'm excited to be in the middle of this evolution.
Continue with your passion, continue to code, and there will be endless possibilities for you in your future. There's a lot of times in my career where someone said, you can't do that, and that actually made me want to do it more.
You'll get a chance to be in an environment where the vitamins and minerals are really set up for you to grow and for you to blossom.
As women coming from different cultures, we are going to face different obstacles than others around us.
Take advantage of these kind of programs.
Find something that really makes your brain go and buzz and with excitement, and then figure out how to make that into a career, because then you'll be happy.
My career is about learning. I don't anticipate ever stopping that journey.
So welcome back, and now for something a little different. From the conversations we had today, you may be wondering, among all the different challenges and stress that we face daily, how can we prioritize mental health and incorporate some more mindful routines and practices into our everyday routine? We're now joined by Dr. Brandon Nappi, founder and executive director of the Copper Beach Institute, who will lead us through a guided meditation to address some of these issues. Brandon, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. And it's an honor to be with you. And I just want to thank all of you for the courage and creativity that you've had to summons in this past year, and all the things that you've done, both visible and the many more things I'm sure that are invisible that you've needed to do to make a difference in your community, in our community, and in the state of Connecticut. And I am the father of 2 daughters, and I'm aware this morning that they will stand on your shoulders and they will walk on the paths that you have created. So thank you for what you do to create opportunity and empowerment for so many women in our community and for everyone here in Connecticut. I'm from Copper Beech Institute, and our work here in West Hartford and throughout the country and throughout the world really is to empower the human spirit to thrive. We stand courageously at the intersection of mindfulness practice, of social justice, and compassionate action. And we do that by leading programs and workshops and retreats, 150 of them each year. We work at the Hartford Jail. We work with communities of folks who are struggling with homelessness and trauma survivors and survivors of human trafficking and veterans. So we have a front row seat and a really privileged position to watch the incredible ways in which people have harnessed the power of not only their presence and their awareness, but the power of incredible courage, which can transform lives. We've seen it, and we feel humbled to be a part of helping that happen. A really big part of our work is also to work with leaders, and we work with nonprofit leaders. And what's really interesting to me is whether we're working with nonprofit leaders or we're working in the jail or the community center or out on the streets, we hear some of the same messages. The same sources of struggle and pain. And we've worked with Pratt & Whitney and ESPN and Aetna and the NBA. And what we're hearing from leaders is that there's a real hunger to develop the heart, to develop this resource of courage. And here at Copper Beech Institute, mindfulness is one of the ways that we do that. And I learned this when I was at the beach last summer. I mean, the summertime is happening around us. So I want to use this metaphor as a way of beginning our meditation. It reminds me of standing in the waves on a particularly stormy day, when the waves are sort of crashing over you. And there's really three options when the waves are getting overwhelming. One is you can stand there and let the waves crash over you, right? And sometimes when we don't know what to do, we become rather paralyzed in the situation, and the waves are crashing and they're really beating us up, right? And then we realize that there's a couple of other options. One is that we can totally get out of the water, and that's a valid response. Sometimes we need to remove ourselves from situations that are too turbulent. But as we found ourselves in the last year in a pandemic, which we can't control and we can't escape, sometimes you can't remove ourselves from such a intractable situation. So when the waves are crashing and you're powerless to turn them off, the invitation is to go deep. And as I watched the body surfers at the beach one particular day last summer, I noticed that they knew this instinctively. When waves were coming on the shore that were too big, they would slip down deeply below the waves. Underneath there was some stillness. And so that's the possible invitation to all of us today, to all of you, is to slip down deep below the waves and to practice mindfulness, this present moment awareness, this capacity that we all have, that babies have, that children have, that many of us have lost over the years. So some psychologists tell us that we are distracted almost 50% of the time. Imagine if we were blessed enough to live 100 years. 50 of those years would be spent in distraction, projecting ourselves into the past or the future. So mindfulness is this incredible technology that we're all born with that is really a superpower because it can help support love and compassion and caring and justice and creativity and meeting the sometimes really turbulent waters that we face. So I'll invite you to join me in some meditation practice now. I invite you just to be comfortable. You're welcome to close the eyes. You're welcome to lower the gaze, whatever feels most nourishing. And I'll invite you to bring some awareness first to the soles of your feet. If we really want to lead, we have to be first present. Right? Leadership only happens in the present moment. And because the mind is wandering in so many places, 50% of the time, one of the powerful and really simple practices that we can bring into our lives is by simply directing attention to the sensation of the soles of the feet. Because the body doesn't know how to project itself into the future, and it doesn't know how to agonize about the past. So by simply noticing what's happening, it can be a really powerful anchoring tool. right? So when there's chaos, we invite curiosity in the present moment. So just noticing what it feels like to have soles of the feet, noticing all of the places of contact between the feet and the floor beneath you. Noticing the way the earth through the floor rises up to meet the soles of the feet, and really like a scientist might bring a kind of deep curiosity to an experiment. Bringing that same sort of curiosity to the toes, and noticing all of the places of contact in between the toes. And scanning now to the balls of the feet. Noticing perhaps the way in which the weight transitions through the body, through the balls of the feet, down through the floor. And scanning through the arch of the foot. And noticing perhaps even if there's just a slice of space here between the foot and the floor. Noticing the heel. The way in which the weight is distributed through the heel to the floor. And just noticing what it feels like to be the kind of creature that has feet. Scanning for temperature, whether that's cold or heat or something in between. When the mind feels chaotic, our curiosity can be a profound anchor. Curious about the nature of our experience. Our deep curiosity grounds us in the present moment, which of course is the only moment that we can ever create, build, grow, be in relationship, or lead. Something as simple as bringing awareness to the feet can help in a powerful way to bring us back to the only moment that we ever have, which is now. Now I invite you to shift awareness from the feet to the breath at the belly, if that feels supportive or nourishing. Of course, if you're really enjoying the feet, you're welcome to stay there and continue curiously studying the feet. But for those of you who'd like to shift, I welcome you to just noticing the breath at the belly and noticing the way in which this beautiful balloon of the belly expands upon inhalation and falls upon exhalation. So breathing in, the belly rises. And breathing out, the belly falls. Again, noticing like a scientist would. Just like a scientist would bring a kind of non-judgmental curiosity to her experiment. Just noticing all of the sensations that unfold, both large and small, in the belly, through the side body, through the back as we breathe. Letting go of the need to breathe in any sort of special way. This is just ordinary breathing. And by bringing just simple awareness to this breath, we're grounding ourselves, anchoring ourselves in the present moment. Because this is the only moment where everything that we cherish happens. It's all here. Love, life, relationship, building, leadership. It's here. So bringing consciousness to each breath is a way of just grounding ourselves in this doorway to the present moment. Maybe even noticing the slice of stillness that exists between inhalation and exhalation. Just noticing that. this stillness that connects the in-breath and the out-breath just for a slice, an instantaneous slice of time. A beautiful reminder that the lungs both need to move and need to enjoy stillness to thrive. A powerful wisdom from our respiration. It's equally true in our work life that we both need activity and decision, and we need stillness. We need stillness to support all of the capacities that we've developed. All of the leadership skills are enhanced by our commitment to be still. Breathing in, the belly rises, and breathing out, the belly falls. And just taking a few moments of quiet just to follow this gentle swing of the breath without needing things to be a certain way. Just really opening ourselves to what's here now. And taking 3 more breaths with great care and slowness. And I'm going to invite this beautiful bell and singing bowl to ring to conclude our meditation. So thank you so much for practicing together, and I hope that you'll always remember that this reservoir of presence, of courage is always living within you, and at any moment in those times of turbulent waves, you can, like the body surfer, dive down deep and access this incredible reservoir that's within you. We practice like this every day at Copper Beach Institute at 7:30 in the morning and at 12:30 for our free community meditations. I hope you'll join us sometime, copperbeachinstitute.org, and let us know how we can be supportive to you in your journey of leadership and service throughout your small community where you work, where you live, and all of your wonderful efforts of being of service to the state of Connecticut. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you for your time this morning, Brandon. That was great. And a great transition into thinking of how we really appreciate to be reminded of the critical role that mindfulness plays in everyday life, both out and in out of the workplace. The next generation of Connecticut women leaders will address challenges and navigate a world many of us could not even begin to imagine when we began our careers. Let's hear from one of those next generation leaders.
Women make up half of our population, but only 19% of C-suite executives are women, and only 3% are women of color. As a young Indian American woman, my very identity has become a hurdle that I have to overcome, and I am not alone. We have a voice, we need to be empowered to use it, and it's time that people listened.
Good morning, I'm Sapna Raghavan, Miss Connecticut 2021. I graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in the class of 2020, and I now work full-time as a management consultant alongside my job as Miss Connecticut. I'm a first-generation Indian American, and I come from a small business family here in Connecticut. Growing up watching my mom succeed as a woman in business, tackling every entrepreneurial endeavor that came her way, empowered me to view the world without limitations based on my gender. For those of you who may not know, Miss Connecticut serves as the state representative for the Miss America organization, the largest scholarship provider for women in the country. It's Miss America's mission to prepare great women for the world, but more importantly, prepare the world for great women. I was honored to receive over $10,000 in scholarships as part of my involvement thus far, which paid for my education but further amplified my voice. More importantly, I became part of a group of like-minded women who are looking to amplify other voices of other women. Throughout my year as Miss Connecticut, I will be promoting the importance of embracing diversity, overcoming adversities. Like most women, leading hasn't always come easy to me. It was when I started my first corporate job that I realized how unconsciously I was falling into the expectations of what it means to be a woman of color in business. From the way I would write my emails, "Sorry to bother you," or "I just wanted to ask," to the way I would carry myself in presentations, not too assertive but not too bubbly, I found myself apologizing for every corner just for doing my job. These are just a few examples of how we as women relinquish our seat at the table rather than rise above systemic bias. I've been fortunate to build a network of incredible women leaders who have helped me grow my voice, and I'm keen on paying that forward. Diversity brings unique perspectives and experiences to create greater value and solve problems holistically. Today, I'm honored to introduce you to two incredible female leaders who have overcome adversities and have risen to new heights as the pinnacles of the Connecticut business community and role models for fellow women. Leander Dolphin is a highly regarded litigator working primarily at the intersection of education and employment issues, aiming to achieve equity for all through empathy, advocacy, and action. She works tirelessly to not only provide legal aid and insight, but also provides collaborative support to cultivate a positive, equitable environment for all in Connecticut. Sylla-Dixon is a champion of equity, diversity, and inclusion as the Chief Diversity Officer of Raytheon Technologies, alongside her efforts across several philanthropic endeavors. She supports organizations through a variety of initiatives and provides opportunities for all. Today is about listening and learning and even unlearning some of the things we have known to be true, and we are fortunate to have these two women to offer their guidance.
Thank you, Sapna. I look forward to seeing where your life's journeys take you. Sylla-Dixon and Leander Dolphin. Good morning to both of you. Marie, let's begin with you. Why did Raytheon Technologies hire a Chief Diversity Officer?
So first of all, Beatrice, I just want to say good morning to everyone. And I also want to just thank CBIA for even holding this discussion. And it is truly an honor to be having this discussion with Leander, who is an amazing leader. So I'm just very humbled to be here. And Sapna, thank you for what you're doing and using your platform as well. So I think when we think about the question, I first want to start off with just some data first. Nearly 3 million women have left the workforce over the past year during the pandemic and are facing burnout. There are 33 women Fortune 500 CEOs. There are only 4 Black Fortune 500 CEOs and only 11 Latino Fortune 500 CEOs. Also, one data stat as well, 1 in 5 senior leaders in corporate America is women, and 1 in 25 is a woman of color. So when we talk about, why the need for having a Chief Diversity Officer, the data really tells the story. And for Raytheon Technologies, in the aftermath of, we had a historic merger, we had the pandemic that happened, and then the murder of George Floyd, which really led to having courageous conversations internally with our employees and with our leader. And because of that, our leader, Greg Hayes, along with the board of directors, made a commitment to elevating diversity, equity, inclusion, and making it a business imperative. And so by making it a business imperative, they felt that it was important to have someone come and lead that for the enterprise and to have a seat at the table. So the role in the diversity, equity, inclusion has really been elevated, and we are accelerating that. And so it is so important to have a Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at the table in a company to show that it really is a business imperative and that it really is one that we are looking at holistically across the enterprise. The other thing that I want to talk about when we talk about a chief diversity officer and diversity, equity, inclusion in the organization is we really have D&I, when we talk about it, it's about our employees, it's about our customers, it's about the communities that we serve. And we know that diversity fuels innovation, and that innovation is fueled by diversity of backgrounds, diversity of perspectives, ideas, and thoughts. We know that companies and organizations that have more women in leadership are also, do much better when it comes to bottom line and market growth. We've seen the data over and over again. And we know that more than ever, corporate America, we are made for this moment. And this is the moment that we have to step up, and we have to make sure that DE&I really is at the forefront right now, and that we have that opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leander for this as well.
Oh, Marie, that's exactly right. Everything you said resonated with me, and it really is the moment, right? And we have, in both of our industries, been working on diversity, equity, inclusion for years. And I think in the last year, it feels like a watershed moment. It feels like there is change happening every day. And it is because companies like Raytheon are appointing, people like you with passion, with the data to back up the good business of diversity, equity, inclusion, and the business imperative. And I'm honored to be here today to talk with you, to talk with Beatrice, and to talk with those of you who are listening in about this important topic.
I can totally be impressed about where you guys have made it. I know it is a hard path there, and I'm sure people really would like to know a little more about that. So Leander, you and Shipman and Goodwin broke a lot of ground this year. You're women of color, and you're one of the people co-leading one of the state's leading law firms. And we know that law as an industry is also a place that is working through inclusion and diversity. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to that position?
Oh, thank you for that, Beatrice. I, started my legal career at Shipman and Goodwin. I was recruited at Howard University School of Law. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's important later. But I started at Shipman in August of 2004. I was a member of a class of 6 women. So there were 5 other women in my class. I'm proud to say that 3 of us still remain 17 years later. 2 of us left and were recruited back to the firm, which is another point that I think will be important as we talk about the commitment that law firms, that businesses need to have when they are recruiting women and when they're recruiting people of color. I started at Shipman in the litigation and employment law groups. I have since transitioned to the school law group. I still do a fair amount of employment work. And I was tapped very early on by leaders in the firm as someone who had leadership qualities. They wanted to hear my voice. And I was asked to join the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. That's what it was called at the time. It has since been renamed, and Marie will appreciate this, to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which is an important distinction between just diversity, which is really just about numbers, and inclusion, which is about being in the room, but equity, which is about making sure that we're being fair in all of our decision making. So diversity, equity, inclusion as a committee really makes a difference in our workplace. So I was elected to the partnership a few years later. I was the first Black woman to do so at the time. I'm pleased to say that we have at least one other, my partner, LaTonya Williams, and I'm looking forward to bringing more along the way. And then a few years after I was elected to be a partner, I was elected to the management committee, which is the governing body of the law firm. And at the time, I was the youngest on the management committee, and I was one of 2 women. I am pleased, and this is important because it's about how quickly the change needs to happen so that someone like me ends up leading the firm, right? So you get there, you're working hard, you're identified as someone who has leadership abilities and potential. You are asked to join the dance. You are asked to lead in certain capacities. You are elected, which shows that your partners believe in you and they want you to lead them. And within 3 years, I was elected to be co-managing partner of the firm with my co-managing partners, Kent Nevins and Jim Ruggieri. So that's been the arc of my career at Shipman. You know, my career and my journey has been marked by support and mentorship and sponsorship at every stage of my career. You know, people along the way really took an interest in me, they invested in me, they poured into me. And in response, I was able to show up and I was able to, you know, I always say I'm very grateful to those women who came before me at the firm, who served on the management committee as the only. And now we're 50% on the management committee are women, and we're being led by a woman of color. That's about incremental change and meaningful change. So I think I'd like to add, and this is important as well, that I am the beneficiary of having a pretty small but mighty board of directors. Those are the people in my life who really, you know, pour into me. They ask me tough questions. They push me to do things that I wouldn't ordinarily do. They are good sounding boards. They give me good feedback. And they ask me to do it afraid. And they push me to, like I said, to do things that I wouldn't have otherwise done. So I have found that to be the steady engine for me, you know, in addition to the sponsorship and the mentorship along the way, that there are, a small group of people, mostly women, but not only women, who I go to when I am unsure or when I am reacting, when I am in need of some good, wise counsel. These are people who know me and they know my strengths, they know my weaknesses, they know my industry, and they know what I need to do to kind of be successful in the area. So I hope that answers your question, Beatrice.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, talking about that board of directors, totally agree. Those were the people I called this morning before I came here. So they're there cheering for me. So, Mary, you kind of talk, you know, pretty closely, very strong about how can corporations do advance diversity, equity, and inclusion? What do they need to do? And what I got out of that is you got to put it in the forefront, correct? You have to be very, very mindful and have intent in saying this is what we're going to do and we're going to align resources behind that. But with that, are there 2-3 things that we can really highlight that will get our corporations to really move forward in these important topics?
That's a great question. You know, corporations really have a huge opportunity right now to leverage their scale, their platform, their people to really make systemic change and generational change. And internally and externally, there are actions that corporations can do. So Raytheon Technologies, by making the commitment, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our initiatives. I mean, one of the first commitments that we have made with one of our legacy companies that is now part of the new company is we have something called Paradigm for Parity, where we have made a commitment to get to parity of women leaders by 2030. We also have made a commitment to double the number of people of color at the senior level, executive level, management level. And that's important for, you know, our team members, our employees to see leaders that look like them. It's important for us to make sure that our workforce is reflective of what we are, which is a global company, and it's reflective of the communities that we serve and live in. We also take a holistic view when it comes to D&I, and in doing that and in leveraging our platform, our scale, our purchasing power, which is what corporate America can do in order to show responsible leadership, especially right now, and stepping up and trying to help move the needle. So what we've done is we are looking at this from, we're calling it our pillars for action. So our workforce diversity being a huge one, because we know that our lifeblood of our enterprise, especially for our 4 business units, really is our people who are our innovators. And we want to make sure that we're investing in our people, that we're growing diversity in terms of the pipeline for underrepresented innovators in terms of engineering and STEM, so getting more women, more people of color into those fields. But we also want to leverage our platform when it comes to issues like supplier diversity. I mean, in the state of Connecticut alone, we spend about $2 billion annually with local suppliers. So it's important that, when we're doing this investment, that we also invest in women-owned businesses, diverse-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, because we know that these are the companies that are, serving, putting jobs back into underserved communities. It also has an economic impact. We also, in viewing our pillars for action, are leveraging our platform when it comes to public policy. So weighing in on education equity issues, weighing in on STEM equity issues when it comes to weighing in at the federal or the state and local level when it comes to public policy. We know that especially right now, our Black and brown children have been highly impacted because of COVID. And so it's important that issues like education equity are addressed and that we're speaking up, because these are our future innovators. These are our future workers. They are going to help all companies, corporations in the future when it comes to issues of competitiveness and innovation. We also, on the community engagement side, we announced an initiative called Connect Up, where we've made a commitment to invest $500 million over 10 years to invest in different initiatives that help grow that pipeline. So one of the initiatives that we've been doing is Girls Who Code. We're a big sponsor of Girls Who Code in the Connecticut chapter, and getting more girls to go into the engineering and the computer science field. That is something that I personally am very passionate about. I am the daughter of a mother who was a former a computer scientist who went into that field in 1960 when there were no women and were no Black women, who ironically went into the aerospace industry herself, who now has a daughter sitting at the table as a chief diversity officer, helping to drive diversity, equity, inclusion for the workers who and the team members who were just like my mom. And so, corporate America really does have a huge role to play and really can help in accelerating that change, because now more than ever, we are at a movement, and we now all need to be a part of driving change so that we really can have lasting and sustainable and long-term impact, so that future generations don't have to go through these challenges that we're going through today.
Well, thank you for that. And I totally can relate to your comments on getting more women and more children of Black and color and brown into our pipeline, correct? So as an engineer, 30 years ago when I graduated, there were 10% women. And basically, of those women, I was the only one from a different background. Then I went to my daughter's graduation at UConn. She's a computer scientist. Same numbers. That's a problem. That is a big problem. And we need to really work together, as you said, to really get that pipeline, that access, and that equity to our populations, because we are, looking at the future of this country, particularly in areas that are non-traditionally female and not traditionally of people of color. So with that in mind, Leander, what can a business do to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion? And how does the leadership model at Shipman and Goodwin help drive DE&I engagement at the firm?
When I think of how Shipman ended up with this first Black woman managing partner in 2021, I think back to 2004 when they brought in 6 women, and they invested in us so much so, as I mentioned, that when 2 of us left for different reasons, they pursued us so that we could come back. That meant they needed to have a place that was welcoming, that wanted us to be in the room. They've, in the time that I've been there, both of my partners who started with me are leading, big practice groups at the firm. They are, part of the fabric of the firm all these years later. And so it starts with identifying, talented people who might be underrepresented, women of color, people of color, inviting them in, and then trying to do whatever you can to retain them, because that's an issue as well. That, as we become more competitive as a nation, as an industry, people move around quite a bit. And so retention is key. Once you get them in the door, what are you going to do to kind of keep people with your firm, with your company? And the way you do that is you offer them true equity. You offer them, opportunity. You offer them training and development. So what companies can do is to not only say that they value diversity, but to live it, right? They have to be intentional, like you said, Beatrice. And as Marie talked about the amazing initiatives that Raytheon are doing, one thing that has happened in the last few years at the firm, at Shipman, was our adoption of the Mansfield Rule. And for those of you who don't know, the Mansfield Rule is a diversity lab project that is, the goal of the Mansfield Rule is to diversify law firms. And it requires law firms to consider underrepresented lawyers at every stage of the firm, whether that is at the hiring stage, the promotion stage, the selection for leadership stages. It requires, us to look at who's going to be on the most important committees at the firm, the management committee, the compensation committee, who's making the decisions, who's really leading that. And when you sign up for Mansfield, you are held accountable to doing that. And being accountable means that you get results, because as Marie knows, that what gets measured gets done. Right? And we have found that to be very, very helpful for us over the last several years. In fact, we've achieved Mansfield Plus certification in the latest iteration because we've exceeded our goals in a number of areas, particularly with respect to women. What we need is to have training on how to push implicit biases outside of the room where it happens, right? So that when people are making decisions about pay, about promotion, about evaluation, that we are not relying on stereotypes or other biases that are getting in the way of giving equity and equitable opportunities to other folks in the firm, especially underrepresented people. And when we talk about providing equitable opportunities for underrepresented lawyers, the result is better because it means that we are being fair to everyone. Right? It means that we've invited everyone to have the same shot at the opportunities. We need to ask ourselves the tough questions. Why have we failed in reaching our goals with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Where have we been successful, and where we've hit some obstacles? And companies that do that get the better results. They end up with a more diverse leadership. They end up with a more diverse workplace because they are intentional, they are measuring, they are not shy about the fact that this is an important goal. And they're not shy about sharing where they've done well and where they haven't. At Shipman, electing a woman of color sends a message to our employees. It sends a message to our community and to our clients that we see leadership differently, that we welcome inclusion as opposed to a culture of exclusion. It tells, everyone, right, all of our stakeholders, that we value different perspectives, as Marie said, that we value different ideas. And the benefit for our employees, I think there are several, But the benefit for our employees is, in addition to seeing my co-managing partners who look the part, right? They are older, don't tell them I said that. They are older white men. They look the part of a law firm leader. And now our employees and our clients and our community also see a law firm leader that looks like me. They hear my voice at the head of the table. They see how I lead and how I am steering the strategic direction of the firm. That in itself has changed the trajectory of our firm, because I am in the room as Marie is. I am helping to shape the firm. And so for our employees, I'll tell you, this is the last piece I'll mention. I get notes still from our employees of color and from women cheering me on, after they've heard me speak or after we've had an interaction. And it fills me up, it really fills me up, because it makes me feel like we're doing the right thing for the right reasons and that we are doing important work. It tells me that it's meaningful. And as I said, it means a lot to me. Every note that I get, I keep. And I can't think of doing it any other way.
Thank you for that, Leander. Some things that you touch on that really kind of stick with me is this idea that to be able to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, we gotta be able to also understand those different cultures and that those different, both the feminine culture, ethnic culture, tradition. Because I remember when I first started working that the idea to get to success was to basically transform yourself into a man, and a man of the mainstream culture. And as we have gone through these last years, the value of diversity is that we embrace who we are in all our different areas and what we bring to the table to the companies. So with that, Marie, both of you and Leander are Black women and senior leaders and lawyers. As a trailblazer, what is your advice for women wanting to advance their careers?
So I'm first going to take a step back, and I want to bring up what you just said about culture. One of the things that we have been doing at Raytheon Technologies is making sure that in our leadership training that we're including inclusive culture, because that is an expectation out of all of our leaders, that they be inclusive, and that they really be empathetic and really put themselves in the shoes of others. And so that is something that, we look for in our leaders. It aligns with our values, and that really does help to drive us towards transformation, change, and building the culture of the future. To your question on, for me being a Black woman, and how I got to where I was, I have to tell you, I think Leander she hit it on the nail earlier when she talked about mentorship and sponsorship. And I was fortunate enough, I've been in, corporate America for 20 years. I'm also an attorney as well. And there have been so many times that I was in the room and I was either the only woman or the only person of color. And if it wasn't for some of the mentors or the sponsors, some of them did not look like me, but who were there for me, quite frankly, who early on in my career, I could, I was fortunate to have, people I could either call or early on have people who, stood up for me, or if there was a situation where, I, felt uncomfortable or couldn't speak up. They were, the ones reaching out saying, what do you think? And I think that's so important for all of us that, when we get in these positions and when we have that seat at the table, that we go back and we lift as we climb, and we make sure that, when we have that seat at the table, that we are also doing mentoring and sponsoring. And I think so for my call to action to you all, especially today, as you are navigating through your career and you are growing as leaders, is that you also try to find the time to reach back and to uplift others along the way. I just think that is so critical, on this journey. And that, it may not be, someone who looks like you, but it is so important that we go and we do that. The other thing I just want to point out too is, don't be afraid to ask for help. Along the way, sometimes in my career, I also am a mother to a 10-year-old. And at some point, there had been, some challenges that I faced. And what I would say is, don't be afraid to ask for help. I can tell you that, my organization, we are 100% committed to making sure that we are growing and having an environment that is an inclusive, fostering environment for women and people of color, because we know we want to grow our pipeline. We want to make sure that our leadership and our pipeline to those higher senior levels, that it is reflective of the world that we live in. And so, what I would also say is don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. I think, right now we have a really unique opportunity in corporate America and just a unique opportunity in society right now, where we're now leaning in and having those courageous conversations. We're now using terms that we may not have used before. And we're also, I think, in an environment now where people can really truly be their authentic selves as well. So I just leave it with you all to say, please, when you get to these positions and as you are moving your way up, please, being empathetic, but also making sure you're reaching back and uplifting others on that journey as well.
Thank you. I definitely, I can really relate to a lot of what you mentioned. So, Leander, you're also an incredible role model. So what would be your advice for women in all stages of their career that are watching this program?
Well, can I just say ditto to what Marie just said? I would say, making sure that you are reaching back and lifting another woman, someone who is learning and just starting, someone who's having a hard time. It sounds like Marie and I have had a very similar experience when we were having those hard times. There were people who reached out and helped. And I would also say, to know yourself. It's rule number one, right? That's what I'm going. And be authentic, because it makes it so much easier, frankly, to show up as yourself. Then you're not confused about how you're supposed to act in a certain situation. And so for me, I show up just like this. I'm a Black woman, right? And I show up that way every day. And all that means, right? Sometimes with curly hair, sometimes with not, sometimes with different hairstyles, sometimes with not. And I make sure that I feel connected to myself, especially when I am afraid. Because my next tip is to do it afraid, right? There are a lot of people who are perhaps mediocre and doing really amazing things because they did it afraid. And I think you should also feel that you've been trained, that you know how to do certain things, that you know what you can do, you know where there might be room for improvement, but that you should do it afraid anyway. I would add that it is important to be self-determinative. That means that there are lots of things in our lives, professionally and personally, that are outside of our control. And but there is something that you can control, your reaction, right? I know I can control my reaction to anything that comes my way, even when it's unexpected, even when it's painful, that I'm the person who is going to be responsible for myself. And that attitude helps me also have a lot of agency in my decision-making, right? Because I realize that I'm not willing to concede power over myself and my decisions to someone else, right? Now, that's not the same thing as the fact that I control everything, because I can't. But I feel as if I always have a choice. And sometimes the choices are not appealing. Sometimes the choice is to stay in a role or in a position longer than you feel that it is serving you. But if the alternative is to be unemployed and you have other responsibilities in your life and that's not an option, it is okay to make the choice to stay until you have the next opportunity that you're looking for. You know, I think sometimes women feel closed off from choice and decision-making and agency. And I think that is an important characteristic of kind of progressing and overcoming some of the challenges that we face. The one last thing I'd add is that failure is part of the journey. We have a mantra in our house. I have a 14-year-old daughter, but when she was 6, she would get very upset about losing. And if you have little kids, you know what that looks like. And she was a sore loser. And I told her then, and my husband and I told her, you know, that losing is part of life, and you have to figure out how you respond to it. We did develop a mantra, and I think I got it off the internet, so there's that, getting your resources, that you either win or you learn, right? So that way it is we win or we figure out what we learned from the fact that we did not win. And that has been instructive as well, because it allows me to not fear the failure, or not feel like I can't overcome it, right? I'm always looking at what I can learn. And I encourage my daughter to do the same thing. You know, in our house, I made sure that I never let her win, right? Because I figured you might as well learn how to lose at home. And I'm uber competitive. And I also don't like to lose. So I made sure that she is the kind of person who's willing to take risks, who's willing to play, even when she might lose, and how she can get better. So I think that is a good tip. And then I think, what's the worst that can happen? That you learn from the experience, right? So it really is almost never something you can't recover from. And then my final, I said final, but this is my final. Welcome those people who underestimate you. I feel like if I'm underestimated or Marie is underestimated, we've already won, right? Because we're prepared. And the other person has underestimated us, so they're not prepared. And so that gives me an incredible advantage because I know myself, I'm authentic to myself. I feel in control of my decisions. I feel like I'm the person controlling my life. And if I am underestimated, that's on them, not on me. And so I would give that tip to any woman, any person who is in a space where they're the only one, that they're in a room where they are questioned because of what they look like or underestimated because of what they look like. It's already won. So that's it. Those are my tips.
Well, thank you. And I know we could talk about this topic for much longer, but I'm sure our audience wants to get some advice and some questions in. So the first thing that we have for Marie is, have you encountered any initial internal or external hurdles on your work at Raytheon?
That's a good question. For me, I think, and I wouldn't call it a hurdle, I really would call it an opportunity. I think it's making sure that everyone feels included on the journey, or that everyone has an ownership stake in this journey and pushing for the culture that we want. That this is not owned by me, it's not owned by our leaders, but it's owned by all of us, all of the people, all of our team members, that, you know, and really for us to drive change and for us to have a diverse, inclusive culture, it starts with every one of us. So that means as leaders, we have to be accountable. That means that when we see actions, we have to speak up. We can't just sit down and sit back, you know, and not say anything. That we have to speak up. No. And I think as we go on this journey, we have to make sure that we know that all of us as team members are driving the change that we want to ultimately transform and be that inclusive culture of belonging where we work, grow, and belong.
Thanks. And for Leander, what are some of the philanthropic or community engagements that the firm is doing or getting involved in to advance marginalized individuals?
Oh, that's a great question. We, a number of years ago, started a program where we tutor at the Wish School. And those students come into our law firm every Thursday, pre-pandemic. We're looking forward to doing it again when we're all back in the office. And that was an opportunity for us to work with children in the Hartford area, who may not have ever been in a law firm, who had maybe never been around lawyers, and who, were learning whatever it is they were doing. And I remember participating in that at the start of my career. That is a long-standing, I believe over 2 decades worth of running that program. We are also a signature sponsor for the Boys and Girls Club in Hartford, and committed $250,000 to the Boys and Girls Club 2 years ago for our centennial, which was, we were 100 years old. And that was the way we thought we wanted to contribute to our community. With respect to, those are 2 examples, but we also encourage our lawyers to be involved on the boards of community organizations throughout the state and in Washington, D.C. We think it's important for our lawyers to participate in the communities that we serve. We push our pro bono opportunities and actually give billable hour credit for 150 hours of billable hour credit for those who are participating in pro bono work to serve underrepresented communities. This year, we are focusing on combining our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee work with our pro bono committee work because we find that there is a lot of synergy there. So, there are tons of things that we do. And again, we encourage our employees, our lawyers, to make sure that they have a foot and a hand in our communities, whether that's in Hartford or Stamford or Washington, D.C. and New York.
So a final question for both. What is the one piece of advice that you will share with your younger selves, given where you are now in your career?
You want to take it first, Marie, or I can take it first? Okay. It's going to be okay. That's my youngest advice, my best advice. I think, when I was younger, I just wasn't sure. I could not have seen where I am now. And I think the advice that I would tell her is that it's going to be okay, and that you have to trust yourself, trust that it's going to be okay.
Marie?
I think my advice for my younger self would be, your career trajectory in your life may not be as linear as you think. There are going to be some obstacles, there'll be some challenges, there'll be some opportunities. And, for me, I went to school to practice law. But I initially took a different path and one that I'm very passionate about. So I would say, don't go on that linear path. There are going to be opportunities that may come your way. And I think the other one is, don't be afraid to take a risk. That risk may benefit you from, learning more about yourself. And it may enable you to really use that as an opportunity to really know what your strengths are and also areas that you can work on. And then I think the last piece of advice I would have given my younger self is know your power. You have a lot more power than you think. So know your power would be the last piece of advice.
Well, thank you. Marie and Leander, any closing thoughts?
No, I've really appreciated the opportunity to talk today with Marie, who is phenomenal and I'm sure doing really amazing work. So it's been great to get to know you better. And thank you very much, Beatrice. I've like I said, I've enjoyed it and I hope it's helpful. I hope to see many of you in downtown Hartford when the world opens up for real.
Marie?
Leander, it has been truly an honor to have this conversation with you. You are truly amazing, and you really are a trailblazer using your platform for good and to really make change. And Beatrice, I just want to say thank you to the work that CBIA is doing, and even having this discussion I think that this is needed. And I also want to say to everyone out there who's watching this that you all are trailblazers, and that I hope each and every one of you, you use the platform and you use your voice to really, any work that you're doing, any career, to really do it with purpose in everything that you do, because, we are all change agents, and any little impact that we make can have true systemic generational impact. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we all want to do, to make this a better world, especially for future generations and for our children. So thank you for having, these courageous conversations, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
No, thank you to both of you. This has been so awesome. I think what I took from the whole day is this idea of courage, correct? Courage from a personal level, courage to mentor others, courage to encourage communities, and definitely courage for corporations to be part of that change. So thank you very much. You definitely have addressed today what is a critical conversation that we must continue in the workplace and beyond. It is so important that we align the goals of business with the goals of communities and of society as a whole. Thank you so much for your time. So this marks the end of our program. I know we could have been here for a longer time, but we hope you enjoy it today and that you learn a lot. I know I'm walking away with a lot of new skills and learning. And we hope to see you in person at next year's conference. Here's one final note from our title sponsor, Medtronic. Enjoy your day. Goodbye.
Bakken was just a phenomenal leader. His legacy still lives on and will live on for many lifetimes to come, I believe. And so when he talks about women leading the world, some can say he's a dreamer, but I do believe that if we had faith in women and if we treated women equally as we do to men, I do think that this world would be a much better place.
Part of my job to bring to the table confidence in what I've done.
Employees feel they can voice their opinions, they can bring their true selves to work.
Think more thoughtfully, not only in one way.
I get to work on very innovative technology.
Diversity brings innovation, and innovation is always good for business.
We know diverse organizations are better.
The stereotypes start from that very early age. I think if we can encourage girls from the early age that they can be who they want to be in this lifetime, we have to create an environment that is an equal playing field for everybody. We really need to raise the awareness of the status of women in the workplace, not just in the United States and Western Europe, but also in those markets where women are not seen as equal. So I believe it's really important on days such as this, International Women's Day, that we share those stories. I'm just so proud to be a Medtronic employee and to say that I work for Medtronic. I think women should be celebrated first and foremost because they're fabulous.